How are we doing? Good morning, everyone. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. We'll call the Management Audit Committee for October 17th to order. Thank you for being here. I think we're getting close to roll call. I see Senator Beitman on the screen, so let's go ahead and initiate roll call, if we could, please.
Senator Beitman.
Here.
Senator Furphy.
Here.
Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Nethercott.
Excused.
Representative Conrad.
Here.
Representative Knapp.
Here.
Representative Neiman.
I think it's Representative Nyman, and he is excused.
Representative Ottman.
Present.
Representative Sherwood.
Here.
Chairman Barlow.
Present.
Chairman Brown.
He is excused. I think he's probably trying to zoom in, so. All right, thank you very much. We have 3 members that are attending remotely. I think 2 are in Wyoming and 1 is in DC, I believe. So welcome to all of you. I think you can see our agenda. Actually, I think we'll move fairly rapidly through some of this agenda, so I appreciate Stanton Lands being here because we may be to you in fairly short order. Anything for the good of the order for the committee before we get started? Nope. Committee members, all right. So let's proceed with our first set of topics. And just for this first one, folks, and particularly in the public that may be participating, watching, these bills were out on we're at our last meeting, presented at our last meeting. So this is opportunity to decide if we're going to move any of them forward. So first, we have Director Obrecht and our lead administrator for this office, or for this committee, Lily Sharp here. Is there any updates or anything we need to know about the bills, the bill drafts? No changes. I don't recall any changes or amendments from the last meeting.
No, just a reminder that the first bill, 138, fully funds a program evaluation division, and the second bill, 139, suspends the management audit committee, and then it sunsets in 5 years. So that's just the same 2 bills that you had last time.
Thank you very much. Committee, is there any questions for either Director Obrecht, who didn't even have to introduce himself, or Ms. Sharp? Any
No, sir.
questions for staff? Seeing none? All right. Is there any public comment on either of the 2 bill drafts before us? Public comment. Is there anyone online and in public? Okay, thank you. No public comment online, no public comment in the room. All right, I guess maybe staff is off the hook unless we start working bills, summoner's motion. So what's your pleasure? Good morning, Vice Chairman Brown. Hope you're feeling well or better. So we have, there is no public comment on our 2 LSO 138 and 139. So committee, what's your pleasure? Any discussion first on the bills or potential motions? Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Director Obrecht. Just for everybody's, bring us all back to speed here, just give a 30,000 foot on what exactly the money in this bill does, and just so everybody's got a clear picture.
You bet. Mr. Chairman, Senator,
Please proceed.
to refresh everyone's memory, 138 is an appropriation for the next fiscal biennium to fund the the program evaluation function within the LSO, or alternatively, with that $1.964 million is to either hire staff or hire consultants to conduct program evaluations, as those are specified within Title 28. 139, and maybe I'll just, before moving forward, just to remind everybody, what has happened to our program evaluation function within LSO is we have transitioned those positions into different divisions within the office, primarily budget fiscal, also some in legal, operations. Really, they've been spread out everywhere. It was simply a demand for resources in other divisions, the legislature telling me and management council that the demand was higher in those divisions than it was for a program evaluation function, while the appetite to expand the budget wasn't there. And so we just made those determinations on where our resources should be allocated. And so in the budget that is currently, I'm developing for presentation to management council, there is not money in that budget for a full-blown program evaluation function within LSO. This almost $2 million would provide that function back into the budget. And then per the terms of the bill, it would be rolled into the legislative budget for the biennium after the next one. Mr. Chairman, what 24 LSO 139 does is sunset this committee in 5 years, but no members would be appointed after March 1st of 2024. So this committee would continue to function throughout the next interim, but not be appointed in the 68th legislature. But the program evaluation function or the legislative audits would not go away. That authority would be placed with management council to appoint either themselves or another committee to conduct those audits if it should so choose. There's no additional money in this budget for LSO positions or for, in that bill, or for consultants. If the legislature wanted to do that, there would have to be standalone appropriations, or management council would have to use legislative special contingency to fund those.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the director on any of the two bill drafts?
Mr. Chairman.
Please, Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Obrecht, what you just said was one of the questions that I had, because I saw where this division or this committee or this management audit was created. And then we've heard through the testimony over the last few meetings that it kind of dissipated, it didn't do anything, members changed, and so there wasn't that. So when we're looking at an appropriation like this and hiring or creating a committee, I'm just wondering how that management council is a part of the legislature, so it's not a full-time bureau or office that I understand. And so how is this going to be done that it isn't dissipated into the different offices like the budget and fiscal and legal and all that stuff like it happened the last time? I mean, what are the sideboards on this and how's it going to work? And maybe you've explained it and I just didn't quite understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Obrecht?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, let me try to answer your question as best I can, and then you can let me know if I did or not. I think that, so we've got a legislative, in statute, this committee, the Management Audit Committee, oversees program evaluations, as that term is defined within the statute. And what that means is you review executive branch programs to see if they have met legislative intent, primarily, if they're functioning like the legislature intended them to. We have done these program evaluations since the 70s within the Legislative Service Office. I would say since my time as director, about 7.5 years, and even before that, due to a variety of circumstances, staffing within the office, the complexity of executive branch programs, how they interact with federal programs, it has made it extremely difficult for the Legislative Service Office program evaluation function to add much value to the legislature. And what the legislature has done then is a lot of times when you stand up a new executive branch program, you require reports from those agencies that that are tasked with running those programs. And then you evaluate based on those reports whether the program is achieving the goals you wanted it to achieve. And so there hasn't been a huge need for these legislative audits. And when they have been done, they've taken a long time. The committee hasn't had a chance for much feedback. I've talked about this a lot before, but the prior committees have tried to tweak the program in a bunch of different ways. That really hasn't been successful in us delivering a product that I think is worth the money we've spent on them. And not because of the committee action. A lot of it is to what I've mentioned before and due to staff turnover. So I think the thought earlier with this committee was, well, it doesn't seem to be worthwhile to continue right now a full-blown committee to oversee this, but we don't want to lose or forfeit our ability to audit or review executive branch programs. And so Bill Draft 139 is an attempt to allow the legislature to keep that ability, but do away with this full-time committee so that legislators can focus their efforts maybe on committees or task forces with more pressing issues. I hope I got there.
Thank you, Director.
Follow up,
Follow up,
please.
please,
Yes.
Representative Ottman.
Okay, and that's clear, but what I'm wondering is, okay, if there's an appropriation and a committee or consultants that are hired, are they going to be just on call, or how's that going to work? Also, what authority do they have? I looked back through in the last audit that I saw for a report was like 2016, if I'm correct on that. So there hasn't been for a long time, but what I'm wondering, what the Department of Audit and then this, what is their authority? How often would they be called up? What do they do when they're not working on reports? Things like that. And I realize some of it may be policy, but when we're given an appropriation like this, I'd kind of like some groundwork. Thank you.
Thank you. So Representative Ottman, some of what we can't hear maybe everything that you're saying. It's your audio it kind of cuts in and out, but I think Director Obrecht will do the best he can to try to respond to your query.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, I think your first question has to do with the almost $2 million appropriation in 24 LSO 138. And so that appropriation would be to the Legislative Service Office. And that appropriation, by the terms of the bill itself, would be expended either to hire external consultants to provide audits for the legislature or to hire LSO staff. So like every appropriation to the legislature, that money is handled by Management Council per statute, and Management Council decides how those funds will be expended based on my recommendations, usually. So I think that answers the first part of your question, I hope.
I think there was maybe a inquiry about whether somebody be on retainer or there'd be maybe a contract type per audit type basis. Would you respond to that, please?
You bet. Mr. Chairman, no, Representative Ottman, no one would be on retainer. In fact, the way it would work is for each audit, you would pick a consultant that would have a special expertise in whatever was being audited. A great example I can have is the legislature a few years ago appropriated money to hire a consultant that would report to the Joint Appropriations Committee to determine whether ETS was using the right systems to decide which software and hardware programs to implement. And so we hired a consultant with a background in IT systems, and they provided the report. If we were to do a report on early childhood education, we would hire a consultant with an expertise in early childhood education. And really, that's been one of the problems we've had with the LSO program evaluation section is we're, with so few people, we're just generalists and can't provide that expertise.
Okay, further questions for the director or Ms. Sharp on either bill draft from the committee? Further questions? Senator Grew? All right, committee, what's your pleasure? You have two bill drafts before you. They are not exclusive to each other, I would note.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Grew.
I would move LSO draft 24-0138, working draft number 3.
All right, so there's a motion by 138, and I heard a second. Who made the second?
Me.
Thank you, Senator Beitman.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Grew and Senator Beitman. Discussion on the bill draft, or actually, let's just work the bill, walk through the bill. Any amendments on page 1? Page 2? Discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I've got one amendment on page 2, just so we're all on the same page.
Okay, we've got a,
Page 2, line 2. Oh, I don't know. I've got an old version. Yeah, never mind, Mr. Chairman. Lily's already got it.
we're on, the one that we have in ours, just so everybody's on save, is point 3, version point 3. All right. Belay that concern? Any discussion or amendments or discussion on the bill? Amendments or discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call on LSO 138, working draft point 3.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for 24 LSO 138.3 Legislative Service Office Program Audit. Senator Beitman.
Aye.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Garu.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott. Representative Conrad.
No.
Representative Knapp. Representative Neiman. Representative Ottman.
No.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Chairman Barlow. Chairman Brown.
No.
Mr. Chairman, there is a tie.
So tie vote, the motion fails. That bill will not be considered unless there's a motion to reconsider. Next bill, is there any discussion or what's your committee's pleasure on 139?
Mr. Chairman, I move 24 LSO 139, working draft 3.
There's a motion by Senator Nethercott. Is there a second?
Second.
Second was Vice Chairman Brown. Thank you. Any amendments on 139? Let's just walk through the bill page by page. Page 1 doesn't have much. Page 2. You'll note the staff comment, there are things in this bill that will not be in the final bill, but, or may not be in the final bill. Page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, notice no amendments, discussion on the bill. Discussion on the bill. Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I will be against the bill. I think that it's an important balance to have this committee. Speaking to the previous, I think that perhaps something smaller in appropriations would be appropriate, but I think that this committee has an important role. When I look at all the task force and select committees that exist and cost the legislatures dollars and money to look at different programs, I think that this committee is important in that role, so I'll be voting against the bill.
Further discussion on the bill draft 139. Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Nethercott.
just as a point of clarity, I think for kind of the purpose of this motion and this bill draft, I think it's a red herring, or it's not accurate to say that by choosing to eliminate or temporarily suspend the committee suggests that the purpose or the intent of the committee is not important. It is a primary constitutional and foundational function of the legislature to provide oversight functions and auditing functions and evaluation functions of all other areas of state government. Full stop. The reason why this bill draft is in front of us is because we do not have the ability to effectuate that mission effectively through the resources we have allocated to LSO and the current makeup of the legislature in this committee, quite frankly. Continuing to do something that is ineffective is not responsible government. And so the alternate bill was, millions of dollars in appropriation to provide some level of resource in order to make the purpose of the committee effective, but it still wouldn't be efficient. Even if we had hired a team of 5 more people to serve as program or audit evaluators, doesn't mean that they would have the requisite expertise associated with whatever whim we had in order to evaluate whatever unpredictable topic we chose. And so we would still might have to do this external RFP to do that. That said, this bill draft does not eliminate that important function and retains that function within Management Council and the standing committees, which I think are more important to perform some of these functions, where Management Council can authorize the appropriation of funds for standing committees to have expert consultants to do a program evaluation. So whether you're going to do early childhood education, which seems to be an important function of the Education Committee, or whether you're going to do an evaluation of agricultural lands in this state, would be an important function of the Agriculture Committee. But maybe not management audit, which has not been able to produce reasonable or effective results for the people of this state for many, many years. And I don't anticipate that to change. So this strikes a balance between continuing to effectuate that purpose and important fundamental mission of the legislature while eliminating a committee that is costly and ineffective. That's why I'm an aye vote.
Thank you. Further discussion. Further discussion on the bill draft 138, I think. I'm sorry, Representative Ottman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I coming in clear now?
Keep talking and we'll know. 139 is the bill draft. My apologies, 139. Keep talking.
All right, thank you. To go along with what the senator has just said, yes, I do believe, especially with the, as I've been listening to things the last couple years, I see the Department of Audit had gone through big employee changes and things, and so there was concern. Where I'm wondering about with this bill is there's a lot of mays. The committee, they may report or they may do this and then they shall, but I don't see any direction on how long these reports can go. They can ask for supplemental information. There's all kinds of things like that going on, and it's not clear to me how this could be any more effective than what we're currently doing. I don't. I'm wondering possibly if it could be worked a little bit better to where it's more clear how are they going to audit every department and get on task, since apparently nothing's been audited for quite a few 7 years, or how's it going to work? And I guess that's why I'm not 100% supportive of this, is because it's so vague in the direction, and the main push for this, as I understood, especially from the senator, was that we need to get something that is effective. And I'm just not sure how possibly having a committee, possibly having consultants, possibly may give these things. It's not clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill draft. Senator Grew.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On against, I guess for me, the only pushback I would give Mr. Chairman is, I understand the notion that committees themselves should maybe be taking up this function. In some respects, they have. We have task forces, co-chair of one, looking into different things. Is that, should this all have been given to management audit before? Maybe. I worry sometimes to say that when we give, especially the Department of Health was mentioned in specific, sometimes there are things that happen in department that transcend one committee, that move over many committees. And so if one committee were to take it up with one specific lens that they're looking at, it may miss something. And that's what I always thought management audit was for. Has it always been perfect? No. I think in the recent past, some have looked at it as a kind of a throwaway committee, but at other times I have seen it be, I think, very effective. Sometimes on it and sometimes just looking at it. So I wonder sometimes if maybe we look at ourselves as to what we make of this. And that, when I look at this committee, Mr. Chairman, I see folks that I think could really sink their teeth into this and really work towards some common goals that would be good for the state, that frankly, you need a little independence to pull back a little bit from parochial interest or a single focus lens, to look more holistically. I know at times that, and I serve on a number of committees, and I know at times one committee I serve on, appropriations, has been looked upon as, oh, they take on everything and they put their nose in all kinds of stuff they shouldn't. Well, we get rid of this committee, well, then it seemed like now you've got to push more towards that goal. I thought we were moving away from that. Then the management, or to the Management Council, a former committee of mine, there was a time, I think it was right before I got thrown off of it, that they felt that the Management Council was too powerful and all overarching and looming above the legislature with grand edicts. Now we want to vote for a bill that seems to give them more power. Like I say, maybe it's just because I got thrown off of it, or maybe I'm part of the problem, not part of the solution. I'm not quite sure. But I think I'm still would like to see the Management Audit Committee continue. I think that we have the people that can do it. I think that at the legislative level, have the leadership to take it forward. I think we have the staff to work with it. I think we can hire the staff we need to do it so we can be a little more lean and mean and targeted. Actually, I have a motion that speaks to that here just a little bit later. So on and against this, but I appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill draft.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Nethercott.
just want to provide maybe some clarity to the role of Management Council on the allegation that this bill draft further empowers the Management Council, which certainly is an inaccurate statement. Any topic that the Management Audit Committee would want to review would have to be approved by the Management Council. So the Management Council is actually the Management Council, which determines the topics for all of the committees, including Management Audit, and appropriates all of the money for the undertakings of all of those committees, retaining, as historically intended, that purpose and power. So this bill draft in no way, shape, or form empowers the Management Council Committee any more than it currently has or was intended.
I think I maybe want to clarify something. Actually, having served on this committee for 6 years, we have never gone to Management Council for a audit or a white paper or anything else. Director Obrick, do you want to clarify? That doesn't mean to say that they don't actually send us things once in a while, but we actually generate what we want to conduct audits and that on. Director Obrecht?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so the Management Audit Committee historically has not asked Management Council approval for audit topics. But what Management Audit has asked for and been approved for is a budget request. And then if there's anything outside of an audit that they may want to do. And that's increased a lot in the last 4 years or so, now that there's committees that report agencies, and then divisions within agencies that report directly to this committee.
Thank you. So just to clarify, that's also something that's changed in the last several years. We used to have two agencies and one portion of an agency. Now we're down to one agency, one portion of an agency that responds directly to this committee. So things have changed, but traditionally, Management Council was not part of the discussion of what the priorities were for conducting audits. So thank you. Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps they should be, in order to create the necessary cohesion within the legislature, so the right arm knows what the left arm is doing. The legislature can work as an effective body. It certainly can control it all by eliminating any funding for the committee. Not that anyone is attempting to do that or suggest that. The point is, as the chairman has pointed out, 3 home committees or 3 home agencies is now down to a partial one. I don't know what more evidence we need to suggest that the committee is ineffective and not doing its role, and hasn't for the entire time I've been in the legislature, and have served on this committee twice. So, I'm just trying to be practical in the effectiveness of this committee. If we are now going to make a stand that we're going to make it functional, then we probably need to evaluate how to do things differently and pass that previous bill appropriating millions of dollars in order to help facilitate its effectiveness. If not, we are committing to do the same thing that we've always done, which means the committee is ineffective and continues to lose its ability to function.
So thank you. Any further discussion? Further discussion? So members, I'll say a couple of things. First of all, we had an opportunity to actually advance an RFP that would have given us those thoughts about how we could be more effective. We chose not to take any action on that. Subsequently, Management Council also took no action on that. So we did have an opportunity to maybe evaluate how to be more effective, or how this could be more effective a function. I think that advancing this bill without some funding to say, we think this is still an important function for the entire legislature to consider, seems also partially getting to the issue. Meaning, we're saying we want to continue the function, but we're not actually giving our colleagues an opportunity to fund that function, whether it's through contract or through the LSO. Because this actually only gets rid of the committee. It does not get rid of the function. But we're not giving the means in this bill draft to do that. Now, this passes, we go to session, we have a discussion with the director about what number that is. It may not be 1.9 million, it may be 1 million or 800,000 or whatever that might be. And then management council will do that. The third thing I would say is probably one of the more challenging things, which we actually have, I guess, maybe not utilized, but contemplated numerous times, is the subpoena power of this committee is very broad, and it is different than, I think, most other committees. And it resides currently in the chairman and the vice chairman. And I don't want to, I'm going to be very cautious if this bill passes out here. I won't amend it today, but I will be very cautious to send it out. And if this bill passes the legislature, for the two chairs of any committee to have that kind of authority, because I do think it's in a very different context when it's in a standing committee, a rules-based committee, and not a statutory-based committee, which this is. So, and that's on page 8, subsection H. It's that subpoena authority, which I think we examined using it a couple times, and it's pretty significant when you start thinking about taking that on, at least in my view. So those are just a couple comments for them. So further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll on working draft 139.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for 24 LSO 139.3 legislative audits. Senator Beitman,
No.
Senator Furphy. Aye. Senator Guru,
No.
Senator Nethercott,
Aye.
Representative Conrad,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
No.
Representative Nyman,
Excused.
Representative Ottman,
No.
Representative Sherwood,
No.
Chairman Barlow,
Aye.
Chairman Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the vote ended in tie.
Failing an affirmative vote, there's no action on LSO 139. Thank you very much, LSO, for all your assistance. We'll continue. All right, move on the agenda to Senate confirmation. Members, you will recall that in the last meeting, or if we had a direction from Management Council, this was from Management Council, to evaluate Senate confirmation and that process. The last meeting, I had a discussion about that the Senate would look at the rules. I have engaged with our Senate leadership, and there is a discussion about what the Senate may do within its own rules about the process of confirmations. However, also in visiting with leadership and some of my colleagues on this committee from the Senate, we thought there was also a place to put out a bill draft. This bill draft was a little bit late in coming, and I apologize for that. That's on me. But it just is a clarification of kind of what are the Senate's understanding of the word term, et cetera. So we'll let Ms. Sharp actually just walk through the bill quickly, or walk through the bill, and then take any questions, and then we'll go to public comment. Ms. Sharp.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, so you'll remember that when you had a research memo by Pierre Chenet, and he noted in that memorandum that the Constitution doesn't actually specify a process for Senate confirmation of gubernatorial appointments, but then in 1979, the legislature established a uniform Senate confirmation process. And in 1996, the legislature amended the uniform process for appointments by including the party affiliation. So what happened this year, as you'll recall, there were when Governor Gordon was appointed for, or was elected, sorry, a second time, not all of the folks that he had appointed during his first term were actually submitted for confirmation in his second election. So this bill amends 28-12-101, and this is the uniform procedure now for confirming gubernatorial appointments. And so if you go to page 2 of the bill, on lines 3 through 7, there it just clarifies that a Senate confirmation of a governor's appointment is only effective until the end of that governor's 4-year term, or until the appointment, the appointee's term expires. And that is because there are certain appointments that the governor makes that actually will go beyond his or her term. For example, the Department of Audit, the director of the Department of Audit has a 6-year statutory term. So this was just to clarify that each time a governor is elected, all of his appointments that require Senate confirmation have to be submitted again to the Senate.
Questions for Ms. Sharp? Questions from the committee? Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Sharp. We'll go to the governor's office is here, or public comment, whichever. Governor's office, please. Ms. Anderson? Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, my name is Betsy.
Pull that just a little closer, sorry.
My name is Betsy Anderson, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff and General Counsel for Governor Gordon. So I'm here today to speak with regards to 24 LSO 0289, which would require the reconfirmation of directors and appointees upon the reelection of the governor. So I just wanted to make about 3 points. First, concern the governor would be that reconfirmation could create difficulties in hiring directors. If directors believe that their job is dependent on Senate confirmation every 4 years, they might not be willing to serve. And I would think that's especially so when the confirmation process right now seems to be a little opaque and not having any real published criteria. So that would be one concern, is just attracting people to these positions. The second point I'd like to make is these directors have to make hard decisions. And you know, if they made a decision and everybody's going to be happy, it wouldn't be hard. But they know they're going to make some people unhappy. And so they really have to be thoughtful in making these decisions. And so I would hate for it to look like the Senate is confirming based off of decisions they made because somebody didn't like that decision, whether it's the legislature themselves or a constituent or a group. When really we see the confirmation process as something that really should be looking at competency and integrity. And certainly hard decisions can be made and still be in line with those elements of integrity and competency. And so then the last point I would like to make is we do believe that the proposed bill may present some separation of powers concerns. The role of the Senate is to advise and consent, and it is the role of the governor to select his cabinet. And so by requiring these directors to be reconfirmed upon the governor's reelection, I think you could argue that the Senate has now inserted itself into management decisions of the executive branch by trying to remove qualified executive branch officials. And that really is the power and the prerogative of the governor. And so those are the concerns that we have with this particular piece of legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any questions for Ms. Anderson, the governor's office? Questions? All right, I see none, so thank you very much. Any public comment? Public comment? Public comment on the bill? Is there anyone online, Kelly? Nope. All right. No public comment, closing public comment. Any questions or any suggestions? Committee, what's your pleasure? Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
There was a motion by Senator Beitman, I think by the screen. Is that accurate?
Yes,
Give me
sir.
a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Senator Beitman, motion on the bill.
I'll second.
I have Chris Knapp in the room first. Representative Ottman, thank you. Representative Knapp in the room. All right. We'll walk through the bill. We'll work the bill quickly. Any amendments on page 1? Amendments on page 2? Seeing none, discussion on the bill. Discussion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman?
Please, Senator Nethercott.
I think the purpose of this topic and the bill draft was to provide some clarity between the Senate and the governor's office. And my view of the bill appears to attempt to do that, but the governor's office clearly feels differently. And so, we'll just keep it the status quo. That's my position. So I'm a no vote on the bill in light of the executive branch's concerns.
Okay, further discussion on the bill? Further
Mr.
discussion.
Chairman.
Please, Representative, Vice Chair Brown, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to agree with Senator Nethercott, but I understand the frustration that it came out of this over the past time around in the Senate side. Being in a House member's position certainly is a little different here, and casting a vote for something that is going to be strictly for the Senate confirmation side of things. But I do think that we have a duty and an obligation to make sure that our constituents are heard in this situation as well. And this is a fairly large change in just as Senator Nethercott put, the status quo. And it concerns me that this was the only opportunity to really look at this, and I've thought a couple of different times about bringing an amendment to change the words in this bill to completely do the opposite and say that this is for the term and as long as the governor is sitting in his respective seat, something along those lines, because we could have gone either way with this particular bill draft, but we chose to go in the direction of making sure that it was only for the time frame in which he was elected, in which I think, in today's highly charged political field, I think Ms. Anderson's comments were straight on. We don't want directors bowing down to the most boisterous, and whether or not they're making the right decision based off of constitutionality, or whether they're making the right decision based off of the people that are screaming the loudest, and whether or not that's going to put them in a position of keeping their jobs. So, as we come up to another gubernatorial election here in another year and a half, I'm sure we'll have some of these discussions, but I'll be a no vote on this, just for the simple fact that I do believe there is some concerns with me that if you only have 4 years and you're kind of near the end of your career and you're being asked to set aside a very high paying job or whatever that case may be to come work for the governor of the state of Wyoming, you may not be willing to do that for only 4 years when you need 5 or 6 to get you to the end of your retirement timeframe. And so I'm not sure that I agree with the sentiment of moving this forward. So I'll be a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we looked at the draft, and we got this topic, I do agree. What we try to do with the advise and consent role is just to look and make sure people are qualified for the jobs that they're applying for. I have to say, in my time in the Senate, I cannot honestly recall a time where I felt that anyone was casting a vote for or against a nominee based on the performance of their duties or a decision that they made in particular. The concern I've had is sometimes about what the definition of integrity and the definitions that some people use towards that. And I thought that's kind of what we were trying to shoot for in this piece of legislation, is frankly to work with the executive to try to come up with a way to make sure that we get it more to exactly what the good counsel for the governor was saying as a stated goal. And so I didn't see it as a separation of powers issue. But as she points it out, I can see that like minds may differ on that. So I know that's not really on or against, for or against a bill. I'm still assimilating what I've heard, but like I say, that was not the intent, was to get into a separation of powers issue or to make people that come up. Actually, I kind of thought just the exact opposite. I thought it gave the governor an opportunity to take, a new governor to take a look, not this governor, but a new governor, any new governor, to take a look at the folks that are on the team and be able to make some changes through this appointment process. I think that was the intent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Further discussion. I'm looking at the screen to make sure none of my colleagues. Senator Beitman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll follow up on what my good friend Senator Gruz just said. I think I'll support the bill. I think, I look at it through the lens of a new governor coming in and wanting a fresh look at things and having that opportunity and the opportunity for the Senate to take a look at who's on these appointments and make those decisions. As far as needing more than 4 years, there may be a governor that only wants to serve one 4-year term. So I don't have any heartburn with this bill. I don't think it goes far at all. I think just adding that one sentence tightens things up, and I would support moving this bill going forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Further discussion? Further discussion? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an interesting conversation. I'll just throw it out for consideration in terms of a potential amendment that would say terms in office. So that would cover if there was a governor who served 2 4-year terms. For your consideration.
That's not a motion. That's just to be thinking about. All right. Further discussion? Further discussion? All right. So I'll weigh in here a little bit. I think having this statutorily is, in my view, important. I think this is trying to give some clarity. I think this has only been done twice, the previous governor's term and the current governor's term. Prior to that, my understanding is it was standard practice that they would be resubmitted. I can be corrected, and if I am incorrect, I will stand corrected. But that is my understanding. So the long-standing application has been they would be submitted. The second thing I would respectfully say is I think it's better to have it in statute, clarified in statute, because the Senate could accomplish the same thing with its motion. The Senate could accomplish the same thing with its motion to confirm, to say that these confirmations will be time limited. And if this bill does not pass, then I would argue that that could be what a future Senate does at the beginning of a new term for a new governor. And then that would be self-limiting by the motion itself, The final thing I think I would offer is I don't believe it affects the current governorship. The way the effective date on this is, it would only affect anyone who is confirmed after the effective date, appointed and subsequently affirmed, et cetera. And I think the standing understanding is, notwithstanding the fact that we could have another 3-term governor based on some court rulings, potentially. But anybody, the next governor, if it's a different person, will be subject to appointment, period, and consent by the Senate. So I'm going to support the bill because I think there's about three or four other ways to actually accomplish this. And I think having clarity in the statute is important. And as far as the process, which was mentioned, opaqueness, I think we had two words, process and opaqueness. If there are suggestions about how to codify some of that, certainly would welcome those. I also, as I mentioned before in our previous meeting, there is a discussion within Senate. I'm having that with leadership, suggesting if they want to have something more or less opaque, that be brought forward. So, further discussion on the bill. Further discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on LSO 24 LSO 298? Actually,
89.
so there's a discussion here to be had since the public has seen this bill one time. Do we want to move it to the legislature? So I apologize. There's a motion to consider it. Do we want to advance it to another meeting, or do we want to advance it to leadership of the Senate and they can decide how they want to proceed? And I apologize. I should have prefaced the entire discussion with that because this is the first time the public has seen this bill and anyone has had any time to review it. So Senator Nethercott, do you want to weigh in?
I think more time is appropriate.
Okay. Any discussion? So our vote will be just a voice vote to advance it for consideration of Senate leadership, whether there needs to be, and whether they author, or whether we want to have another meeting of this committee to consider it. Is that accurate? Is that acceptable? Senator Nethercott?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it is. And I guess one piece that I would ask is that the governor's office maybe think of some solutions to the criticism of the process and the opaqueness, which I don't disagree with. But it's helpful to hear some solutions, from the executive branch, who is the firsthand recipient, in addition to these nominees, of the opaqueness of the process. And so certainly some solutions would be appreciated, as this is why we're coming together, is to clear up the opaqueness and to provide certainty to a process, or at least clarity. So if we could do that together, that'd be helpful.
Thank you. So absent any objection, we're just going to advance this. I'll have a discussion with Senate leadership and they can take it to Management Council, whether we have another date to take this and any other bill we may have come up. If that is not what occurs, then Senate leadership will decide how they want to, if they want to proceed with this bill. Senator Nethercott? So thank you, Senator Nethercott. So this committee actually doesn't work on a day process. It works on a budget process. So we have, in the past, have had, if we need an extra day to finish something up, we can request that too. But so far, I don't think we're out of days. Management audit usually has two two-day meetings and one one-day meeting, and we're at 3 one-day meetings right now.
I think all the committees work similarly, and so it's, in that it's a budget-related question. Are we out of money? Let me ask it another way.
Ms. Sharp?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not certain, but we could always do a virtual meeting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, absent objection, we'll just forward
Mr.
this.
Chairman?
Yes, please. Senator Biden.
Do I need to withdraw my motion then? I moved the bill with the assumption that this was going to be a committee-sponsored bill. So based on the discussion, I can withdraw my motion if that's.
Yeah, that's fine. We can withdraw the motion. And I apologize. I should have clarified what your motion was, that we consider this bill and advance it, not that it be a committee-sponsored bill. So my apologies. So absent objection, we'll forward this to Senate leadership, and they can decide if they want to take it to Management Council to request another day for this committee to consider this, or another meeting. Absent objection, we'll go with that. Thank you very much. Next bill, as I told State Lands, we would probably get to you very rapidly. So it's 10 o'clock. Let's just continue. Let's just go with State Lands at this time. And please come forward. And Ms. Sharp, I think we've actually gone through the bill last time, so I don't know that you need to, yeah, thank you. Good morning, Director, Deputy Director, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
And that microphone is not very good, so you're going to have to pull it fairly close to you, Director Scoggins.
Is that better?
That is, thank you.
Okay, thank you. For the record, I'm Jennifer Scoggin, the Director for the Office of State Lands and Investments, and with me is Deputy Director Jason Crowder. We are here to speak about the 2022 House Bill 54 and the potential for moving forward with something similar. This bill is really gauged at recreation, and as you might imagine, that we have a lot of recreators that like to utilize state lands for various purposes, and OSLI, we can't oversee what we term overly loved parcels where informal recreation is occurring. So we have two options because, as you know, we have a fiduciary duty to the trust beneficiaries, and state lands were given to the state to help generate revenue for the trust beneficiaries. So in our fiduciary role, we have two options: to either close down the informal recreation or to find a way to manage it. We, OSLI, we do not specifically have the skill set to manage recreation. However, we have worked successfully with county governments in recreational opportunities, such as the Pilot Hill project over in Albany County. And what we're starting to see is recreators, since the COVID in particular, are really wanting to recreate on state lands, and in some instances, they believe they've created a recreational opportunity for themselves, and they want to stay, and they've been using the lands for some time. So 2022 House Bill 54, it's a tool that would allow OSLI to leverage skills and resources and expertise of other agencies such as state parks to effectuate recreation opportunities on state trust lands. It would allow the trust asset to be managed and not degraded. So with this particular bill, it would allow parks to conduct trail building, which would help prevent erosion, and control over the site to help manage the public in coordination with existing surface lessees. We did review and work the House version of this bill during the session in 2022. We do not believe that the Board of Land Commissioners needs this particular bill to enter into leasing arrangements for recreation on state trust lands. However, we've been informed that state parks would need such authority. This bill would allow site-specific rule enforcement. State Parks has law enforcement capabilities that OSLI does not have. It would allow them to receive compensation to pay the Board of Land Commissioners for the lease, and it also provides funds for management costs. The Senate revisions that I believe the committee was also provided with, those occurred on the floor. We did not have an opportunity to analyze or anticipate that those would be brought forward. We do have some concerns with allowing existing grazing lessees to manage recreation on the state trust lands or other existing surface lessees. We want to make sure that we're not missing out on bigger opportunities. We need to be part of conversations concerning recreation potential, and these conversations need to be holistically with all potential stakeholders in the opportunity. We need to understand what would be going on. So we're a little bit nervous about the Senate proposal to allow third parties to essentially manage recreation on state trust lands. And with that, what did I leave out, Deputy? Anything? And Mr. Chairman, I do believe that State Parks is here too, in case the committee would have questions of them.
Thank you. Deputy Crowder?
Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't have anything to add to the director's statements.
Okay, thank you. Members of the committee, anything? As you'll recall, this is one of the assigned topics from Management Council, is how to get more fun or more returns out of state lands, high-value state lands. Any further discussion? Any questions for the director? State lands, did you have anything you wanted to offer? Excuse me, my apology. State parks, do you have anything you wanted to offer up, or I guess the commission or anybody? want to offer anything? Please come forward and stay there if you'd like, state lands, in case there's questions to how the interaction would go. Good morning. Is it director now, or are we interim director?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's Acting Director Dave
Acting.
Glenn of Wyoming State Parks. If this is in the best interest of the state, then we stand by to help. That's what we do. We manage recreation, and we're good at it. I just want to be really clear, though, this is not a money-making venture for state parks. Where we help is with the economic development in communities, roughly $651 million annually. So this is not a money-making venture for state parks. So if you do move forward with that bill, please keep that in mind. And it also helps, I think, with the bigger picture of educating our visitors and our residents as they're coming into the state, distributing them to different locations, to communities that want to promote their type of outdoor recreation, and at times concentrating them in areas as well. I also just want to state that by law, we would need to go through a thorough site criteria process on any one of these leases. We have a great planning department. That's what we do. This process includes public comment, estimating visitation, estimating revenue, any capital construction costs, maintenance, additional staffing for law enforcement or fee collection, those types of things. And then that comes back to the legislature for approval on that. And with that, I would just stand for any questions.
Questions for the acting director? Questions?
Mr.
Senator, we'll go to Senator Grew and then Representative Ottman. Senator Grew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Acting Director, how are you?
Doing well, thank you,
Good act
sir.
so far, by the way. Thanks. So you say it's not necessarily a money-making venture. Well, let's talk about that for just a second. We heard the testimony from the folks at State Land say this isn't necessarily their bailiwick, and so if you all were to help with that, the value in that could be then working with state lands, they could help direct parks through their identification process, the land board, to identify areas that could be deemed appropriate for public use. And then thereby then you all would go to work and use your expertise to develop that based on the guidelines that they laid down. Do I have that right?
Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, exactly.
Follow?
Please, Senator Grew.
And so then when we talk about dollar value, there may not be a lot. You have costs associated with that, and so it may just be a wash. But the value would be that then the folks at parks or at state lands would be able to delineate and have a plan to utilize opportunities for the public, which would be good for the public, on the vast amount of state lands that we have, and maybe move away from areas that maybe they don't want that, where right now it's a little more vague. And I'll ask that, maybe I should ask that of state lands, because that's not quite state parks. Would that be a fair statement?
Director, please.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, I think that's an excellent characterization of it, that we can help identify areas that we believe might be appropriate for recreational opportunities or potentially expansion of existing state parks opportunities, but work in consultation with one another to move people into those areas that are more appropriate. I think that's an excellent characterization.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, please.
Please, thanks. So the first bill, which gets into this mirror bill thing, the House bill that went through the House, that basically you all in lands are okay with that. It's the second bill, the Senate amendment, and particularly the Senate amendment that said private interest, like if I have a grazing lease on the property, that then I could do a sublet out to do some sort of thing, that was where the kind of choke point is on your end.
Please proceed, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, that's correct. Our concern would be for third parties managing recreation on state trust lands. We believe that that's something that we should be overseeing and in consultation with and with the right partnership.
And if I can have one
Please.
last one, so now Acting Director Glenn probably wouldn't want to get involved in that bailiwick anyway, would you?
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, I couldn't quite hear that. Can you?
You wouldn't necessarily want to get involved in a third-party deal with that, because that would muddy the waters on your end, wouldn't it?
Mr.
Please,
Chairman,
please
Senator
proceed.
Grew, yes. Frankly, if the lessee is not interested in us participating in itself. Additionally, we probably would not want to play in that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for either of the agencies? Further questions for either of the agencies? Yep, Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if there's a way to do it, but what I would like to see, we have so many out-of-state users coming in, and quite honestly, I see some of them abusing our state lands. Is there any way to collect a fee on those out-of-state users versus our in-state users, which they should have access to the land? But you see my point about the out-of-state users. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I guess either agency that would like to initiate. All right, Director Scoggins first.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, at this point, we do not have a specific permitting sticker or something like that we would sell to out-of-state users or even in-state users for that matter. We are aware that Montana and perhaps some other states are implementing sort of an annual or a day sort of pass for uses of state lands, and we have not reached that point where we're able to carry out that function where we're permitting people individually like that to utilize state lands.
State parks?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, we do that within state parks. We charge a $7 day use fee for residents and a $12 fee for non-residents. If this bill were to go forward, our preference would be not to charge a separate fee for state lands, but to incorporate it into our park systems fees. So people could pay their $7 fee or their $12 fee or buy their $48 annual pass versus us creating a whole separate permit just for a specific piece of state land.
Okay, thank you very much, and I apologize to those online. Representative Ottman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for a point of clarification for me, on page 7 of this bill, and I don't know exactly who would answer this, but you guys know. So what I'm looking at is where it says funds received from state lands leased for recreational purposes as authorized shall be accounted for separately. Okay, so there'll be that revenue generation. And then it goes on down and says the department may use the funds received for recreational purposes to pay for leases. I guess where I'm wondering about is if in this, if we're putting leases up for recreational and for instance, like grazing, if there's going to be that competitive edge, what are we talking about here when we're putting money towards leases? I'm not really sure on that. Thank you.
Director Scoggins, I think it's probably for you.
Mr. Chairman, I think the best way to characterize it is we would be issuing a special use lease to the state parks, and then state parks would be paying the Board of Land Commissioners or the trust beneficiaries for that special use lease. And that would authorize them to conduct activities on state lands, which would be managing the recreational purposes. Now, they may collect a separate fee through their system, and I think the attempt of this provision then allows them to collect that fee as well as to utilize monies that they receive to make improvements and that sort of thing. And feel free to expand on that.
State parks? Director?
Mr. Chairman, I think Director Scoggin has it dead on. From our perspective, though, I want to be clear that the way that is written on pages 7 and 8, we would have to keep it a separate account, which we do not have the ability to do right now to be able to track our revenues when they come in. If somebody buys an annual pass, we don't know whether they're going to use state lands or whether they're going to come to a state park. So we have some concern with that. We have some ideas on how to maneuver that forward. That's just one piece that I would like to throw out.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Beitman, maybe you had a question. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is for state lands primarily. Question revolving hunting and fishing access and how, if this bill were to become law and we would have somebody that would be a holder of a recreational lease, would they be able to deny or close off essentially hunting and fishing for that state section?
So just to be clear, I think the way this is formulated now, only state parks would have that lease. So the question is, can state parks prohibit, at least in the current text, current understanding of this bill as drafted, could state parks limit hunting and fishing access? Director Scoggins?
Mr. Chairman, I would defer to Deputy Crowder. He knows all the ins and outs of our permitting processes. So
Thank you. Deputy Crowder, my apologies.
Mr. Chairman, through this bill, state parks would not have the ability to limit that type of use. That use is provided by the Board of Land Commissioners as a privilege through their Chapter 13 recreational use rules, and it's a free use of that land. Inside of those rules are a process and criteria for which the board can restrict those uses based on certain criteria. If the board moved that authority to state parks and in conjunction with approving the lease for recreation, also restricted hunting and fishing, it could do so in a partnership with state parks, but state parks wouldn't by itself have the ability to make those restrictions.
Thank you. Senator Beitman, did that get to your question?
For now, sir, thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And please forgive me, but to go back to my previous question, when these come up, so Parks Department or special recreation people can bid on this property for lease, or so the Parks Department is going to go up against other entities for use. Is that right? I'm not quite sure on how the procedure is going to go.
Thank you. Director Scoggins?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I believe that we would collaborate with state parks initially, and then state parks, if it desired to go forward with a leasing opportunity, then they have their own internal rules that require them to go out for public comment and that sort of thing to make sure that this is in fact something that the people would like to have done. But we would not be necessarily in every case issuing an RFP or something like that. We could, we do have that tool in our toolbox, but not in every instance. I think it's site specific.
Thank you. So just to clarify, I think from my own mind, this is authorizing state parks to participate in something that currently you could do with any other entity that may come along and wish to pursue this. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So if somebody else were to come forward and approach us about some of this, we would certainly entertain whatever proposal they might have, but not in every case would it be a competitive situation with an RFP.
Thank you. Any other further questions for either of our agencies? Representative Knapp.
This is particularly for state lands. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you envision these leases to be the same term or longer terms due to infrastructure that might be placed into those sections by state parks? And then also, obviously you have a pretty focused purpose on maximizing state land leases and dollars. Even though income may come through tourism and use of those lands, would it be a fluid lease that involves the number of users with fees where you can actually maximize your returns, or would it be a set amount?
Director, there's maybe three questions in there. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, with respect to terms of leasing and all that, that has yet to be determined. We do have, a standard special use lease form, if you will, but it doesn't prevent us from tailoring things to address other issues that may arise. Pardon me, if you could restate your first question.
The second part of that was improvements. If there were improvements placed on the lands, I believe, and associated with a lease, how would that be handled?
Mr. Chairman, and I think he also talked about the lease term. Our leasing term allows us to go up to 75 years, but we're not allowed to lease for longer than the useful life, if you will, of the activity. So the lease term would depend upon what we determine that to actually be. With respect to improvements, Jason, I'm going to turn that one over to you because I'm not sure we have all of the tools in place to address improvements at this point.
Mr. Crowder, please.
Mr. Chairman, improvements are largely discussed when the lease is issued by the board or approved by the board. And so we understand what they'll be, and we understand what the economic life will be. And then working with the applicant, in this case, State Parks, also what the maintenance schedule could be, and that influences the economic life, which influences the term, as the director mentioned. That can be very fluid, depending on what State Parks feels the demand is for that area. We can approve, or the board can approve improvements to be removed or new improvements to be added at any time during the lease structure. And that might also play into the rental structure as well. Each one of our special use leases comes with a term, and this would likely be in the upwards of 30 to 40 years, just based on comparables of other recreational activities we have. But also, if new additional uses are added, we can amend that lease at any time, and each lease is reviewed every 5 years for rental appropriateness. So it can come down or be increased at those 5-year rent reviews.
Thank you. I think there was maybe one last thing was, how would a lease be structured, number of users, or how do you actually get the returns that you want to? And if you want to address that, maybe it's too early in the process to understand that, where we'd be, but Director?
Mr. Chairman, I think with respect to structuring for number of users and what that looks like, I think that's going to depend upon the lease as a whole and the terms that are negotiated, and perhaps in consultation with State Parks, what they think the facility can manage, what that means monetarily. I think there's a lot of outlying facts that we don't have as we sit here today for specifics to limit those things. I think it would be a case-by-case discussion as to whether that's appropriate and necessary. And of course, we're going to look at these with respect to how can we generate revenue to benefit the trust beneficiaries, and how can we work with State Parks to make sure that is accomplished.
Thank you. Anything further? Anyone online? Further discussion? Senator Guru. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. I think I've heard all the pieces of my answer to my question, but I just want to kind of pull it together. It has a little bit to do with what the good Senator Beitman was bringing up too. So if I heard you all right, and just tell me where I'm wrong on this, is probably the easiest way. But if you had an area anywhere in the state that you were leasing out, and someone wanted an entity came forward and wanted to do a recreational lease, and part of it would fall into the particular purview or would be best managed by parks. But yet there are other parts, and making sure that you had access for hunters, access for fishermen, but there might be some uses that the park folks had that wouldn't be appropriate for maybe some of those uses, but there would be on other parts of the parcel you were dealing with, that you could kind of tailor that, and parks may have a part of it, or for a camping area, or an area that of different types of uses, but then there might be other uses, but then you could have a whole plethora of things that you had to take care of on that parcel, weed management, all sorts of other things that you were trying to do to fulfill your fiduciary responsibility. So you could maybe have one leasee overall, but the Parks Department have a role to play. You all continue to have a role to play and all that. Is that how we see that playing out as a possibility?
Deputy Director Crowder.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Gruitt, it's a fantastic question. And it's the reason that probably 99% of our lessees are government entities. One of the things that we look at is sustainability, and wanting to ensure that we have a good lessee that can make their payments and not degrade the value of the land over the term of the full lease. When we deal with recreational groups, and we do that often, we do that typically through a temporary use permit, because those groups largely change personalities relatively quickly, or their uses are very much short in duration. It's an adventure race, it's a mountain bike race or something like that. They're not long-term. So we like to deal with government entities. County commissioners is our greatest lessee. We have in Sheridan County, in Bighorn County, Uena County, and I believe in Laramie County as well. Those commissioners can sublease their activities to individual users, but at least we have, as the state, a sustainable situation where the government will always be there and the government can always be approached to make their payments or fix any problems. So yes, that's who we want to deal with mostly. We can and have, and the Pilot Hill example over in Laramie is a great one. Albany County is the commissioner, Albany County Commissioners are the lessee in that situation. They've subleased to the Pilot Hill Group, and the Pilot Hill Group and the Albany County Commissioners have created a partnership, not only of the membership of the Pilot Hill Group, the users, but also with the Game and Fish Department to manage the recreation, manage the trail use, and manage the wildlife hunting and wildlife habitat area. That can also come in a fluid nature because that's the situation right now. The long-term plan, and who knows when we'll get there or if we'll get there, but the opportunity exists to also bring somebody in like state parks to manage that holistically, or maybe even own that property in the long term, looking way out. But creating that partnership of allowing all of those different users, if the property or the asset can allow and absorb all of that, is certainly a win-win situation for a recreational lease like we're contemplating here.
Okay. Further questions for either of the agencies? Further questions? Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. I do think that for state parks particularly, that revenue or that division of how you're going to actually comment or figure out what you're getting out of these different things without creating a new system, a new permitting system, is something that if this bill advances, some time and effort will have to be put in that. And then I know the state lands didn't make any comment on the Senate amendments. Have you had a chance to look at those, and is there anything in there that, it's very specific to a grazing lessee that already has a arrangement with state lands, but is there anything there that you'd want to comment on out of the Senate adopted amendments? Please.
Mr. Chairman, I think I would defer to state lands on something like that. We would be the lessee. There would be other lessees available. I would reiterate that, frankly, if a lessee does not want us there, a grazing lessee, we have no interest in being there. Our goal would be to support that lessee by hardening trails, building fences, and doing things such as that.
So just to be clear, there was two amendments that affected the department directly, at least initially. There was no more than 5 leasing agreements. That's one of the limitations. And the second one was also adopted, and that was one that the department had rules, notice, and a hearing process. And just for clarification, you believe you already have that when you are developing whatever lands there may be. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that's accurate. And we are totally good with the 5 prototypes, pilot projects, just to see how this works.
Okay. Thank you very much. Further discussion, further questions for either of the agencies? Seeing none, thank you very much, all of you. Any public comment? Any public comment on this? Good morning, Ms. Herman. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr.
Welcome.
Chairman.
Please introduce yourself and make comments.
Marguerite Herman, and I'm speaking as a board member for the Advocates for School Trust Lands, and it looks like you've really exhausted all the questions on this idea, and I speak in favor of it. Just reminding that OSLI has a tremendous staff to figure out what kind of special use leases terms need to be approved to achieve the sort of 3 parts of, really, it's the fiduciary duty to maximize revenue, to protect the asset. So they're not going to approve of something that destroys the asset, and then protecting future revenue possibilities. And so, and they have done this repeatedly. Pilot Hill is a great pilot project, so to speak, and shows their ability to negotiate that, work with local governments. As you mentioned before, without restating, Parks has a process review, and the Board of Land Commissioners has to approve all these leases too. And then you have the built-in 5-year review. So I think if people have heartburn about what's going to happen, I have complete confidence that OSLI can figure out all the terms, put together a good deal for the land, for the beneficiaries, which, just to remind everyone, are public schools in Wyoming. And they've got the capacity and the record that they do a good job at that. If they get something wrong, it will be obvious. And also, let me just say that they have worked at trying to monetize recreation. And you think it would be easy, but it's not. And the revenue stream is a problem working that out. And they have done a lot of research on this, and this seems like a good way to start that process. So I encourage you to approve this, and whatever stamp of approval you can put on it, I encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for Ms. Herman? Questions for Ms. Herman? Seeing none, thank you very much. Further public comment? Mr. Garrett? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Richard Garrett. I'm here today representing Habitat for Humanity of Laramie County, and not speaking specifically to the bill, but to the concept of the bill, which is to maximize the return to and the obligation to the fiduciaries and the benefit of the fiduciaries through leasing of state lands. I know you've heard, many committees have heard from OSLI about the potential for leasing state lands for residential, affordable, attainable workforce housing. And that is a concept that I think falls neatly within the concept that this bill is contemplating as well. So I'm only asking you to open your minds to the opportunities that we can responsibly develop in this state to benefit both the trust and those people that need and depend on affordable, attainable workforce housing in our state. So with that, no more comments unless you have some questions.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Garrett? Questions for Mr. Garrett?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much. Further public comment? Further public comment? Further public comment? Is anyone online? No one online? Thank you. All right, committee, you have bill draft before us, and remind me, Ms. Sharp, if you will, these bills were actually before us in the last, this bill was before us in the last meeting, but the amendments, we asked them to be brought forward just so we'd have them for complete the discussion. So this is actually our second meeting of this bill, et cetera. So I think if there is interest by the committee to advance this bill as a committee bill, I think it would be appropriate at this meeting, as it was not maybe appropriate for that last bill draft. So committee, what's your pleasure on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, let's move the bill.
I have a motion by Representative Conrad, I believe, by the way is that accurate, Representative Conrad?
Yes, sir.
And a second by Representative Sherwood. Motion and a second. So let's actually, I think best thing to do is, are there any amendments? Just walk through the bill quickly, then we'll have a discussion on the bill. Amendments on page 1 of the bill, page 2. And just so we're clear, page 2 is actually the guts of the bill. This says they can actually do what they say that gives them powers, and then the rest of the bill is trying to effectuate that. Page 3. Page 4, also at the bottom of this page, is the department's ability to do this. State lands. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 7, we heard some comment committee from the state parks that there probably needs to be some more thought into how this would be within their own system, segregated, the funds, et cetera, and how that would be accounted for. So there may be, We don't have language maybe now, but if this bill advances, hopefully we'll get some feedback from them about how that would be dealt with. Okay, thank you. Page 8,
Mr. Chairman,
please, Representative Sherwood.
I think that we need to update some dates here. Page 8, line 1, do we need to change the 2023 to 24, 25?
So I think we'll give our LSO staff some latitude to advance the dates in this as a technical corrections
Thank you.
and do that throughout, including the effective date, as this was a previous year's bill. So I don't think we need a motion. If this moves forward, that'll be accomplished of a matter of course. But thank you for catching those type of details. Page 8, page 9.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Beitman.
not an amendment, just further discussion. Maybe somebody can answer this question on this. This 36.5.115 deals with state lands, not state parks. And kind of going back to my question earlier about the hunting and fishing access on state lands, not necessarily state parks. I'm just worried that, maybe there may be some unintended consequences on state lands. And I'm wondering what the and other organized recreational purpose truly means, what we're getting after, what the intent of that language is, adding that to 36.5.115. Can anybody answer that for me? And is it necessary? Because you said the meat of the bill was back in a different section. So is this clarifying language, or does this do more than clarify, or is this substantive? Thank you.
So I think, and thank you very much, Senator Beitman. So this is, I think you are correct. This is referring to state lands. So maybe we'd have either the director or the deputy director come forth and just see, is this necessary, this language, other organized recreational easement, which I guess I'm wanting to know what organized as opposed to unorganized recreational purposes. So Deputy Crowder, if you would maybe try to address Senator Beitman's interest in this new language. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is just a clarifying amendment. 36.5.115 gives very specific items that are within the definition of recreational purposes. Those are cabin sites, public campsites, public parks, recreation areas, golf courses, and associated residential developments, youth groups, and ski winter sport areas. We don't fully understand everything that state parks may be able to do on the parcels that they would lease for us, but we want to make sure that those are defined within the term recreational purposes as well. This also goes further than that. The Board of Land Commissioners, as I mentioned earlier, gets approached for adventure races, for target shoot activities, things that are not specifically defined within the definition of recreational purposes in this. And so it's conforming in a way as well to try to bring what the Board of Land Commissioners is currently considering and maybe approving on its lands with the actual definition within statute. It's a very broad use, as the acting director of state parks mentioned. There's a lot more use of these lands as time has gone on, and when this particular statute was written, maybe we didn't contemplate every single use that's currently being asked to be done on our lands, on these state lands. So it's just a broadening of that definition for when the Board of Land Commissioners, not only working with state parks, but any other applicant coming into the office, we could house them under the definition of recreational purposes.
Thank you. Senator Beitman, did you want to follow up in any manner? Go ahead, please.
Yes, please. My follow-up would be a question: has there been any cases where you've had to deny somebody because the language wasn't broad enough? And are there any examples of having to turn people away because statute's too limited?
Please proceed, Deputy Crowder.
Mr. Chairman, I cannot think of a time when we've had to deny an application because it didn't fit this definition. We possibly have approved uses that don't fit this definition.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion, Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And since we were talking about organizational, back on page 2 where you said it was the meat of the Bill.
So
I was,
Representative Ottman, you're breaking up just a little bit. What page did you refer to?
thank you. Page 2, page 2. And I was just wondering, and possibly Deputy Crowder can explain this, but we're talking about, because this is constitutes outdoor recreation areas. When we go down through there, we're including the historical parks, historical, archaeological, geological, ecological, now in existence or hereafter created. In a day, and I'm just going to throw this out here because it's a concern, in a day where the BLM is being extremely aggressive, how are these things going to be determined, like in the future? Is it going to go just to the parks and their budget? Is it going to go before legislature? How does it go to determine, especially ecological and geological and archaeological into those that could be created? How is that going to be figured out? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative Ottman. So actually, this is referring to State Parks Authority, not the Office of State Lands. So I think let's bring forth state land or state parks to see if they have a response to you. But this is existing statute, and what I meant when I said this actually gets to the heart of what's necessary is this is the much of the authorization that would allow state parks to use state or to have an agreement with state lands for recreational purposes. And I think that is very specific in the new language on line 18. It is not doing this for ecological, historical, archaeologic, et cetera purposes, by the way I read it. But let's have state parks respond to anything that they might hear. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that is exactly correct. We actually talked with the AG's office, and they said, if you are going to enter an agreement to lease some state lands, this new language needs to be incorporated in there because you do not have the ability to do it by statute right now.
And to be clear, the way I read this language is you could only use those lands for recreational purposes, not any of the previous purposes that are in current statute. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, that is my interpretation as well. And if I could add to respond to Representative Ottman's question, additionally, we do go through that site criteria process. So this will come before the legislature again when we come back from our site criteria and said, we want to enter this lease with state lands. This is what the chunk of land will be. This is what it will look like. And you will have another chance to review that as well.
That is a very interesting separation of powers quandary we find ourselves in here right now. Another one. Thank you. Thank you. Representative Ottman, did that help clarify which agency and what the specific purpose was?
Yes, I appreciate it. I just still am stuck on the hereafter created. It's not just dealing with what we presently have. It's things being created, and I'm just not.
Thank you. So I think as an example, the legislature created a missile site north of town 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So any of these sites are actually authorized by this legislature, these new sites. And the way I understand the way this is currently formulated, any of these leases that the Department of State Parks wants to take forth based on state lands would also come before the legislature for approval. And so I think there's almost a double check here, triple check, one with the commissioners, the Board of Land Commissioners, through the leasing process, the second through the second one through the site criteria and all that public input. The third one ultimately would be with the final one would be the Wyoming legislature. So I think actually there's 3 checks potentially you could look at it in this process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you. Further questions, and I apologize for dragging you folks back up, but I think they were worthwhile getting to them. Further discussion or further questions on the bill? Any final amendments on the bill besides the technical one that was pointed out by our good colleague? I think we're done. We're done with public comment. Thank you. Do we have a motion on Yeah, we had a motion. We had a motion by Conrad, a second by Sherwood. So this would be a motion to advance this bill to the session. Further discussion on the bill. Further discussion on the bill. I'll make a further discussion, seeing none. I'll make a comment on the Senate amendments. I think that the first amendment, which is a second reading amendment, was regarding grazing lessees and them having, and maybe you'd call it a first right of refusal on potential grazing or on a recreation lease. And the money is still the same, whether they develop the recreation or not is different, and that was adopted. It seems to me that through the process, the three-step process, which I believe now I understand a little better, i.e. Board of Land Commissioners making it available, the public process that the state parks would go, and ultimately the legislature, this seems like there's multiple checks in that if there were concerns about the grazing, particularly the grazing lessee, because that's what this amendment speaks to, is out there. The next amendment was 5 leases, no more than 5 leases. And then the last one was saying that those five leases are not subject to the grazing or the first right of refusal. So we kind of had a reversal of the first policy. And then the hearing process, which is the 4th one that was adopted, I think what we've heard in testimony today, that exists. And I would say it exists probably at 2 levels, actually 3 levels: Board of Land Commissioners, the state lands, and the Wyoming legislature. So I think most of the things that were concerns in the Senate can be addressed within the process that is envisioned, currently in place and envisioned if this were to move forward. So further discussion, seeing none, please call the roll on, this would be a updated draft with the proper number for the 24th, 2024. This would be a new number, but it would be based on House Bill 54 from 2022. This would be for introduction on behalf of Management Audit Committee. So please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, this is for the committee to sponsor 2022 House Bill 54 as a 2024 budget session bill. Senator Beitman.
No.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Nyman.
Excused.
Representative Ottman.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Chairman Barlow.
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the motion is adopted and move forward.
4th time is a charm. So the bill draft, as reconstituted, will be advanced. Thank you to state lands and state parks. I think there maybe needs some work to be done on that understanding, and let's actually try to get that done sooner than later so we can kind of move that forward. So I don't know that it involves you folks, but it certainly involves you folks. So I think we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we do have some more state lands items after our break. There's going to be a motion. Senator Grew?
Yes, and for the folks online and for the members here, I sent a motion to you just before the start of the meeting. So it's in your inbox, should be in your inbox. If you'd all take a look at that, I just want to make sure you saw it, and we'll get some copies printed up during the break.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will reconvene at 11:05. I don't anticipate this motion will take very long. So I see our Public Funds Division here, Department of Audit here, the directors in the back, and I think even though we're scheduled for that at 1 o'clock, I think we'll just proceed in that in a timely manner. So I'd expect by 11:30 or 11:30 will be to your presentation. So I don't know if you had anybody else, but just giving a heads up to the public that may be listening and interested in the Public Funds Division discussion, we'll probably be taking that up about 11:30. So we will reconvene at 11:05. Thank you. All right, we'll reconvene now. Thank you very much. Have our folks from back online, those that are present. Is there any public online that has their hand up or interested in? Okay. All right, so as I mentioned, there's going to, Senator Grew had asked that, as some will recall, the last meeting, there was a discussion Senator Grew brought forth. Maybe he was out of town, couldn't maybe explain where he wanted to be and what he wanted to do, so he's trying to have that conversation again. So I'll turn it over to Senator Grew to kind of outline where you are and then proceed from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do appreciate just a little bit of latitude. First, I apologize to the committee that I was not in attendance physically last time, and I know it makes it a little bit tougher because it was kind of hard to get some of what I was trying to get out. So, but I took the direction of the commission or the board or committee, sorry, to heart. And so I've provided you all with a motion that, if you recall, last month I asked to put out an RFP to have us, this committee, try to get some expertise on these high-value lands, which was our charge for Management Council. And that did not curry favor with the committee. So I've kind of stepped back. And before I talk about the motion, I just want to make some remarks. And a lot of this, by virtue of recent passing understanding, I serve on a number of committees, TRW, appropriations, and this committee, all of which have been dealing with state lands issues during this interim. And I've been hearing a lot from state lands. There's been a lot of state lands issues in my county. And through that entire process, there's been some perceptions. And my motion last meeting was kind of went to the heart of it, but I didn't get a chance to explain. So now, with the sufferance of the chair and the committee, I'd like to take a minute and kind of give you some context. I've had conversations with residents and leadership across the state, and I'm hearing a growing concern about the lack of transparency and the appearance of accountability and inconsistent application of OSLI's rules and their processes. At a higher level, I see an increasing disparity between OSLI operations regarding state-owned lands, Wyoming values, and the goals of our residents. I'm hearing from agricultural interests around the state, one of OSLI's largest and oldest community-supported partners. The perception is they're feeling mistreated and they're feeling marginalized and left out of the process. And when it comes to land management and lease renewal. Not only is agriculture deeply embedded in Wyoming's economy and culture, but it's essential to Wyoming's Western brand for tourism, which is of deep concern to me. State-owned lands are integral to these ranchers, and OSLI's recent change in attitude towards agriculture has serious economic and cultural implications for our state. That's their perception. Is it fact? I don't know, but it's the perception and it's real. In my county, OSLI is experimenting with new uses on state lands without a plan, without a consistent plan, or the expertise, frankly, to do so, in our view. We feel that's been a detriment to our state lands and a detriment to their value. We feel that it's caused unnecessary litigation and real concern in our community as to the value of our own land and the diminishment of that value by virtue of some of these policies and some of these actions. Since statehood, state-owned lands have been generally managed in a manner that has contributed to a stable Wyoming communities and optimizing the values of state lands. But now, with inconsistent and what seems to be the perception is it's a more inconsistent application of these processes, I feel like that the OSLI is losing its way, and it's turning management of lands into a destabilizing force, not only for agriculture, but in our own economy in my county. OSLI's approach to decision-making and resulting in growing frustration at the office is not run with respect to optimizing these funds for Wyoming's children's education. and in alignment with those values and principles. In my county, OSI is incurring huge legal and administrative costs for their management decisions. OSLI's had lucrative operations and a mandate from the legislature to seek advance and options that has chose to ignore some of those, in their view, that the folks are being ignored. And this too is a problem. So in taking all that into context, and I want to say very clearly right now, and I had a good talk yesterday with the director and Mr. Crowder, and I want to make clear, these problems and these perceptions that I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from my constituents is not necessarily an indictment against the folks that work at OSLI. I think the truth lies and the fault lies in measure in ourselves, in what legislative directives are given and what are not given, and to the State Land Board in how they are approaching and giving direction. At times, and this is no surprise to anyone who's involved in state government for very long, we seem to be sending mixed messages. They seem to be having to try to cobble together the tea leaves of what we're saying versus what the state electeds are saying to them, and come up with policies. To me, what screams out here is that they need a plan. I've tried to offer suggestions on how to do it, but I think now, from listening to my colleagues from the last meeting and talking to leadership and talking to folks, I bring forward this motion to ask this committee to do its job, to frankly do its function, and to do, and whether to hire consultants or use our staff to do a full audit, well, as you read it, to analyze the unique nature of all state trust lands and Wyoming laws and regulations governing lease and sale of state trust lands, to provide recommendations to legislation to optimize revenue for state lands while reducing conflict, improving accountability, addressing the needs and concerns of stakeholders, minimizing poorly planned development, and producing durable long-term solutions that maintain traditional uses of state lands, and meeting the state's fiduciary duty in managing state trust lands. This review will strive to find ways that OSLI can improve its efficiency, its revenue-generating opportunity, and its alignment with community values and service to the state of Wyoming. This is the essence of my motion. I'd like to move that at this time.
Thank you. So there's a motion by Senator Grew following his opening remarks. Is there a second? Second, Senator Nethercott. Thank you. And this is, obviously, this is not on the agenda for folks to maybe come in and comment. And State Lands was provided this very recently, and even there were some discussions yesterday. So we'll give them an opportunity if they want to respond, but they're certainly under no obligation to do so. Any discussion within the committee as they consider if they want to come forward? Discussion within the committee? So to be clear, this is asking for a audit, which would be the primary functions. And since we failed the first two bills, I guess we're still in business, and we'll figure out how to go forward this through Management Council. So is there any public comment on the motion or on this draft or this motion? Seeing none? Very good.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Landon. Sorry, I had to look at the screen to see who was moving.
That's
Please
okay.
proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be supporting this because I do think that, as you just stated, we're still in business. This committee still needs to be doing some work, but I do have some concerns with the motion in general. When you look at the motion is full of potential contradictions, right? And when you look at something like that, I think that's exactly what the bringer of this motion is attempting to try to resolve, is that we have so many different varying intricacies coming into play here when we start talking about our state lands, that our state lands our Office of State Lands and Investments, they are doing everything in their power to try to appease everybody. So when I look down, the only problem that I ultimately have an issue with is this review will strive to find ways that Owsley can improve its efficiency, its revenue generating opportunities, its alignment with community values, and its service to the state of Wyoming. You have in certain places in this state where community values are completely contradictory to what this state in a general whole is interested in doing. I can think of at least 2 counties off the top of my head where that's a very, very serious consideration. And we need to be careful when we put language like this in there. That community values are certainly very important, but the community values are not overriding, in my opinion, those that we have placed into the Constitution to say that we need to maximize this land for our states. And so I do have concerns with that language in general. I'm not going to motion to amend this. I will support this. I do think at the end of the day, we will get a good report out of this, but I think it's imperative that we understand that when we put a motion like this on the table, that we're asking for everything to reduce land conflict, improve accountability, addressing the needs and concerns of stakeholders. That's what they're already trying to do. They're already just having a hard time doing it. So what I'm afraid of is we're going to go down the path of spending some money, producing an audit, only to tell us that we've done this to ourselves. And I guess at the end of the day, I think that's ultimately going to be what we receive is we've attempted to hear every bird in the forest sing. And we're now trying to figure out which one it is that we want to hear sing on a regular basis. And, right now we've got a bird chirping that sounds really pretty, but Office of State Lands and Investments has 35 other birds chirping in their ears. So I'll support this. I think it's a wise idea for us to have an audit of our agencies. That's part of our process here. But at the end of the day, I do think that this motion exemplifies 100% exactly what we're trying to fix. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion from the committee? Further discussion, and I think I need to be clear. What I understand the process for this motion would be, this would be advanced to Management Council, and they would take up whether they are willing to advance it further for a development of an RFP. RFPs require funding, and I think that it's appropriate that they actually review this prior to our staff putting a lot of time into developing an RFP that may not go anywhere without Management Council authorization, because I do not believe, Ms. Sharp, this committee can't just put out for an RFP independently. Is that accurate?
No, Chairman, but what you could decide is whether or not, just what you said, is whether or not you want, whether you want staff to prepare an RFP for you to review first so that you see what is actually in the RFP, or whether or not you want to just provide this motion to Management Council and see if they support it and then request their permission to actually prepare the RFP.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take that up at the end and clarify the motion before we advance. I think, was it Senator Beitman? Somebody moved up on the screen, and I apologize.
Yeah, that was
Senator
me. Thank you. I'll just piggyback off of what Representative Brown was getting at. My concern is this, with some of these studies we've been doing, I think of the one we just did on the acquisition value study on the Revenue Committee. It kind of comes off as when you provide direction like this, it kind of shows a little bit of bias as to what the outcome you want to see come out of this. With this revenue generating opportunities, alignment with community values. When I see revenue generating opportunities, to me, it sounds like we're nickel and diming our citizens to use recreational options and things like that. And I don't know, I'll support this, but I share the same concerns as Representative Brown does. And I just would hope that the Program Evaluation and Research Division would give adequate attention to both sides of all these issues and not just try to produce something that they think we want, which is, obviously maximizing revenue at all costs. But I would hope we also balance multiple use and free access to our public lands as much as possible for our citizens. So those are my concerns. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else online? Anyone else online? Representative Ottman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find this very refreshing, and this committee is amazing with the expertise and history within this committee. One of the things that I do appreciate about this is looking at the minimizing poorly planned development. We've seen with a few ideas that we have put through with the legislation as far as follow up on bonds and building and things that are just not maintained, that a review of things would be good. Also with the OSLI, sometimes I feel like, oh my, they're only after this, but their fiduciary responsibility is to get the best price for the land. So that's not always the idea behind multiple use. So I appreciate this because maybe we can clarify things a little bit and take some pressure or misunderstanding off the directions that different entities are given. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else online? Seeing none, any other further discussion from the committee? Further discussion to Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, the way I envision this is, and I think in consultation with the chairman, I think the best way to proceed, and what I truly meant was to go to Management Council and ask them, can we go forward with this before we put our staff through a whole big, a lot of work and a lot of regeneration to have Management Council just say, no, we're not interested. Ask if they're interested. And if they are, then when they come up with some ideas during not during session, but between now and next interim, then they come forward with a potential RFP, and then we put that input into it about what we want to see in it and what we want to see in the RFP, and let this committee kind of brain it in. And to be honest, and just go back to some of the comments from my colleagues, which I appreciate very much, is that frankly, I think what would come out of this is if we hired some folks to come and really take a good hard look at this, what I feel would come out would be as many directions for us as legislators, for the State Land Board, as it is for the staff, to say, you've got to come up with a plan. The reason why they're having such trouble is because it's shotgun, it's everywhere. It's one legislator drops a bill about one county's land, and then the land board goes off in another direction, and then they rely, frankly, on whoever walks in the door. And so it's reaction. It's always reaction. Maybe we should all get together and have a plan and talk about what our values are when the good senator talks about having, making sure that hunting and fishing and the things that he values are there. I agree with him. The same thing when Representative Landon talked about, yeah, well, he'll point out that, who's the problem? We're the problem, possibly. And so that maybe throw the gauntlet down to us to say, what do we need? We need to give clear direction. So that's what I think an audit does. And that's what I recall in the more golden era of this committee, that was what came out of it was specific examples, not only for the folks running the departments, but an audit of ourselves about how we're tasking the folks to do it. So that's what I look at. That's what I'm looking at the whole, and we have lots of input to this. And I don't want to predetermine, as someone said, I have no predetermined outcome in this, but what I do know is what's happening is it's not working in my community, and it's not just my community. I've heard from folks in agriculture and around, so that's what gives rise to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Grew. So I think that then there's numerous amendments I could make this, but I think the most important one right now would be that in the first line, we're not directing LSO. What we're going to request is Management Council authorize LSO program evaluation to prepare an RFP. Does that get to what you would like to accomplish?
Yes.
Lily, did that make sense? Did you understand what I'm? Right, so we're not directing LSO to proceed with an RFP development. We're actually requesting Management Council authorize and direct.
Authorize and direct
Yeah,
LSO.
that
Okay.
be accomplished. And within that, I think that what we would get in Management Council is probably some modifications to this motion about what they would want to see. So there's I've made I think what I'm going to consider a technical correction to this amendment. So if you want to vote on it, we can, but I think it's actually the proper way to approach this. Okay, seeing no objection to that. Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for clarity, is this then motion for Management Council to come up with the requirements of the RFP? Question, period, that's it.
Senator Nethercott, I think that while this motion outlines a lot of those things, I think what's actually attainable in doing an RFP and who responds to it is also important. So I think that will be, what you're asking will be part of the process. I don't know that word for word, we're going to get this in its entirety into an RFP. I think it'll actually be probably more programmatic based and where authorities lie, i.e. with the state land board versus the legislature versus OSLI, et cetera. So I think there's actually going to have to be some divisions within that RFP about who has those authorities and where we're having those conflicts. That gets to some of these issues where we may be missing something. We have constitutional authorities with the state land board, period. We know that. So I guess maybe we are giving, maybe my suggestion to the motion is giving Management Council some additional authority, but the bottom line is I don't want our staff to go do a lot of work on an RFP that we don't get authorization to actually spend money to do. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's fine. I'm just thinking about Management Council's bandwidth to understand all of the conversations that have happened here today and throughout the meeting, and want to make sure that the members of this committee feel comfortable with the contents of the RFP and have fully evaluated what it is. And then Management Council just approves an appropriation of funds with, the proposed RFP attached. I think that's the only way for this committee to achieve what it envisions with this motion, is to maintain that type of ownership, and obviously giving it to Management Council for the approval of an appropriation. But, so those are my concerns, and I'm neither for or against, but recognizing then that I also serve on Management Council, and where we are in the interim, and the kind of typical role of Management Council is not to hold full-day meetings. Is that what we're going to be required to do, and essentially take up the work of this committee? Logistically, it may be easier not on staff, but it doesn't necessarily make sense for Management Council to take up the banner of this committee in that way.
Okay.
Again, I'm neither for nor against, but I just think it needs further thought out.
So to be clear, you would rather we just proceed with development of an RFP, and then we seek authorization from Management Council. And I'm fine with that, because I think that development actually culminates after the upcoming 24 legislature. I don't think we're going to have any chance of having something done before, just based on the workload of our staff, and I would not ask them to. But if that's the case, that we're willing to let that go beyond the end of this next legislative session, in preparation for the first, or a Management Council meeting and a subsequent management audit meeting, since we still exist in the next interim. I'm fine with that. If we think we're going to take up we're going to meet a couple times, I would argue, to review an RFP, or to review something on behalf of our staff's work between now and when we would advance that to management council or request that. Because I do think that this isn't big enough that we have, if we're going to take it up, then we're going to be a part of it as a committee. Does that reflect what you're wanting to accomplish?
Mr. Chairman, I'm agnostic to this entire issue. I just think it needs more thoroughly thought out, these next steps. We're either making our statement here today, or we're actually coming up with a strategic plan of how to implement this process. And so I'm looking to the sponsor of the motion to hear his feedback, as he cares deeply about this topic, to understand. I mean, I think staff could probably prepare an RFP. I think if we're already going to come back and do a Zoom meeting, that can be further developed within this committee, that we can move faster than years out. But again, I'd like to hear from the sponsor.
Okay, we'll get to this sponsor on the motion, and there was not unanimous acceptance of my suggestion, so it's on the table, but it's not been adopted. Go ahead. Oh.
I'm going to offer what may be a clarification to get to the point of just process. So the existing language as it reads, this committee would request to Management Council to authorize and direct LSO Program Evaluation and Research Division to work with Management Audit Committee to prepare an RFP for your consideration.
And I don't know that changes what Senator Nethercott's concern was, but go ahead. Senator Grew, let's keep moving.
Yep, sorry. I appreciate my seasoned colleagues' remarks, and I do. What I was thinking, and when we were discussing this, was Management Council gave us this topic. They gave us this topic. They wanted us to study the disposition of high-value public lands. That's what they gave us. And we've heard testimony in this committee, and as I said in my comments, and I've heard in other committees too, a wide range of issues, and they all kind of lead to the same conclusion to me about a plan and the need for one. And so this is what that attempts to do. While I would just as soon we do this and write an RFP before, I'm concerned about spending a lot of staff time and missing the mark with the Management Council. I'm comfortable with going to Management Council and saying, you ask us to do this. This is what Management Audit Committee has brought back to you as an idea to answer the question that you ask us. Let us continue. Stop. And then hopefully they would, since they ask us, I would like to think that you and the other members of the committee would say, okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Please,
for clarity,
Senator Nethercott.
I'm not resistant to any of this. In fact, what I'm really saying is, as a member of Management Council, I don't want to work this topic in Management Council. Management Council does not operate like a committee meeting. That's not its purpose and not what it's intended to do. And so my preference would be for this committee to do the work that it's motioning for today, and Management Council simply says yay or nay with a couple of amendments if necessary. But asking Management Council to take on the next step of the work, I'll do it, but I'd prefer if I did it here with the people who care about this topic here. That's my only comment about it, is in which committee am I going to be required to finish this work? And I'd rather do it here.
Well, now that we still have a Management Audit Committee, we'll give you that opportunity. All right, so I think my suggestion is off the table. I think it actually makes sense. You've convinced me otherwise, even though you were trying to support me. You convinced me otherwise. Management starts as it was. The motion is as it is. Further discussion. Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Please, Senator Beitman.
Thank you. Just so I'm clear, the buck will stop with us now, correct? Like we will have the final say on what this RFP looks like, not Management Council. Is that correct?
I don't know, thank you, Senator Biteman. So I don't know that I would say the buck stops with it, but we will certainly have all the creative ability in the beginning to formulate it the way we think it makes most sense. And then it will, the release of the RFP, I do believe requires management council authorization because it will require the potential of expending money. And so that doesn't mean so all that to say, they may modify something within it, but I think to Senator Nethercott's, if we do our work well and visit with our management council colleagues, hopefully that will be a smooth process.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
would we be able to approve or disapprove of said modifications if they're substantive? I don't want to vote for something that gets changed by management council significantly and not be able to change my vote accordingly if they change it substantially from what we are authorizing here today. That's my concern.
That's fair. And I think maybe there's a discussion I'll have to have with Director Obrecht and staff and management council leadership just to clarify that process. Not something that I've done before in this manner with an RFP coming out of this committee for a specific purpose. So there's probably some things I don't maybe understand. But I think advancing, at least starting the process of developing the RFP, at least moves that. And then if we get to a point where we're not comfortable with the process after that, then we make an adjustment. Senator Nethercott.
I have nothing.
Okay. Further discussion. Okay, there's a motion on the table as presented and requesting the preparation of an RFP. We will be involved in that.
Mr. Chairman, may I clarify? Is this still to create an RFP that would be considered at your first meeting after the budget session? Because we could not, it will take substantial amount of staff time to prepare an RFP for this. It's such a wide topic, and it will take substantial study by the Research and Program Eval Division. And so that's it. And I can even see it maybe taking 2 committee meetings where we bring you an outline of where we would go with it and then finally prepare it.
So I'm going to suggest as the modification is to be considered in the committee's 2024 interim period, not tie it to the first meeting. Hopefully by the first meeting, we'll have a draft and then we can discuss the draft and then we can advance from there. I mean, we're trying to give staff some space here.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Conrad.
forgive me as the uneducated. Can you, Clark, articulate what motion specifically we're going to vote on?
So the motion is as presented, should have been emailed to you. The only modification is I think this wise suggestion of our staff is we'll just, for consideration during the 2024 interim, not specify the first meeting. So we'll just strike that first meeting reference.
Thank you. I did receive it, and thanks for the clarification.
All right, further discussion. So this is a motion. Let's just have a roll call vote just so we're all clear where we are.
Mr. Chairman,
Just to be clear, I saw no public comment going once, twice. Anybody online? Kelly, thank you. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Senator Garew's written motion provided to request Management Council to authorize and direct LSO to prepare an RFP to study optimizing revenue from state lands to be considered in the 2024 interim.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, sorry, I wrote that for Tanner, and then I think I made a mistake. So it's not actually I'm just going to clarify, it's not to request Management Council, it's to direct LSO.
Thank you.
Is that
Yes,
correct?
thank you.
I'm sorry, that was my fault.
Thank you for the clarification. It's back to the motion as directed, but for the 2024 interim, not the first meeting. Please proceed.
Senator Biteman.
Aye.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Nyman.
Excused.
Representative Ottman.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Chairman Barlow.
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the motion is adopted and move forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Guru. So there will be some more work to be done on this as we, staff starts putting this together. So thank you for those topics. For state lands, state parks, I think is gone. We're to our next topic. I see Auditor Racina's here and her very capable deputy, Ms. Troutwine here. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So we'll go to Department of Audit. Mr. Chavez, thank you, Director. Thank you, Deputy Director. Mr. Chavez. I actually don't see Michael here. I see someone else. So sneaking someone else in here on the right. That's good. Director, please introduce yourselves and proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Justin Chavez, Director of the Department of Audit. Mike is unable to be here today, so I have with me Rich Cummings. He's our state and local government audit manager. It's his program that manages the census process for us. We've been talking about compliance, so we have just some quick updates as far as our census compliance goes, and then any questions the committee may have. So what was provided for the meeting was the initial non-compliant report for the required census reports. So this year, as of September 30th, there was 370 entities that weren't compliant as of that date. That's about 78 or 17% fewer than last year. So we did get some improvement in compliance as of the statutory date. Looking this morning, we're down to about 209 entities that are non-compliant as of the end of the day yesterday. That's still about a quarter of them. So ideally, we'd like that compliance rate to go up sooner, but some improvement over the last year. Most of the non-compliance is due to the follow-up paperwork. So we have the census report itself that's due, and that has all the revenues, expenditures, cash, and investments. And then based on revenue and expenditure level, that then determines if there's additional documents that have to be filed with us. And it's those additional documents that generates most of this non-compliance. We still have some entities that haven't submitted the actual census report of finances itself, but the majority of it's due to the follow-up paperwork that's required. So that's the update we have. And I'll leave it up to any questions the committee might have.
Thank you. So members, in your meeting materials, and the public, it's in the meeting materials for everyone, there's a non-compliant report, and you will see, and I actually went through the list, and all 23 counties are represented in some way, depending on the entity, including numerous municipalities, lots of special districts, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions for the director? Any questions for the director? Seeing that, I guess I have a question, Director. The census report, I think you indicated that majority of those are actually made in a timely manner, the greatest majority. The follow-up materials, is that something that many of these entities could have anticipated that they would need to follow up with, or are there unique circumstances where they don't know if it's necessary or not? And I guess my query is if they knew they were necessary when they send the census, if they send it in with the census, then would we have a better compliance rate? So either yourself or Mr. Cummings.
Mr. Chairman, I think they can reasonably determine what they will be subject to based on their history. They tend to have, for the most part, similar revenues and expenditures every year. So I think in general, they have a pretty good idea of what additional paperwork they're subject to. And then they have from July 1 through September 30 to submit. And so I think, there's 3 months there to identify the additional paperwork that's necessary and get it submitted.
Thank you. And so is there actually a notice that goes out from your office or is it just, the obvious is there's a statutory requirement, but is there actually a notice that goes out from your office that says your census is due? And oh, by the way, in the past year, you've had these other materials, send them in as well? Or is it just part of the, on your website, they're saying, make sure you send in your census, period?
Mr.
Director?
Chairman, we send out communication every year. Every July 1, basically, we send out communication reminding all the entities that it's census time, they need to get their reports sent in. And then when they submit their census report, we notify them of what the additional paperwork is that needs to be submitted.
So, thank you, Director. So is it possible to actually, when you send the original census, to notify them that in the past, they've been responsible for these other materials, so sending them all together would help with compliance? I guess my point, you see what my point is if you tell them X is due, even though you know dang well Y, Z, QP, all those are also going to be necessary as well at some point later, that throws them into a non-compliance, which potentially has consequences, real consequences, and we have a bill to try to get that. So I want to figure out a way we get more compliance earlier, and I think that's what you want. I'd rather do it with a reminder and a carrot than maybe not a carrot, but a reminder than a stick at the end. So is there something we can do with that in that process to help with that?
Mr. Chairman, I think we could, as part of our notification process, let them know that based on the previous year, this is what would also be due. We also do a lot of training, though, year-round in terms of what's required and when. But I think we could, as part of our initial notification each year, let them know what would be required based on the previous year's submission.
So I guess I would personally like that to be, you can continue exploring that and figure out a way to do that, because when you get a list that has 340 non-compliance, I want to know that they're substantive we have to understand, are they substantive non-compliances or are they administrative type things? And if there's a way to reduce that administrative way from your end, I think that would go a long way. I'd love this to be 2 pages next year instead of whatever it is, 12, because maybe we've made just a change at your end that could help accommodate that. So that's the thought. For any questions from the committee? Representative Sherwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if I forgot the answer to this. Are entities able to submit online through a portal?
There's a
Mr.
question.
Chairman,
Go ahead, Director.
Representative Sherwood, the census report itself is an online form, so they actually go out and fill it out and submit it online. The follow-up paperwork they would download from our website, fill it out, and then email it to us.
Perfect, thank you. And maybe if there are very consistent types of information needed, those become fillable forms as well, in conjunction with the appendices, as an appendices, let's say, Director, to the census report or something like that. I just, like I said, I want these to be substantive non-compliances, that we're actually looking for something and not just paperwork. And I know that you also have a statutory requirement to have cost of government report out on a particular time. I get that. But maybe if we help on the front end, we can get folks more compliant for the right reasons, not incorrect, yeah. All right, further discussions from the committee? Further discussions? Yes, Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, I just have a couple general questions. First off, if there's 370 that aren't compliant when this report was sent out, what is the gross amount of entities that do report to you? And secondly, what what happens if they don't at all submit the follow-up materials? And thirdly, is there ever money that's due with these? Thank you.
Director, there was several questions in there. Go ahead, proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, I'll try to remember what.
How many total entities are they that are responsible?
Varies year to year based on new entities being coming into existence and others dissolving, but generally between 900 and 1,000 is what has to report to us. If they don't, if they never come into compliance, current statute directs state grants and loans to be withheld from the entities until they are in compliance, and current statute directs county treasurers to withhold funds from special districts until they come into compliance. And then at the end of the year, if special districts aren't in compliance, statute directs those districts to be dissolved. And then in terms of fees, are you asking if we charge any fees? If I'm not clear on your last question.
Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hadn't thought of that, but yes, are there fees? And when they give these reports, it's to say what money they brought in and what money went out. Is that basically it? And what other kinds of things are they responsible to report? And I realize you have municipalities and special districts, and so they could be somewhat different. But as a rule, what kind of paperwork do these people have to supply to the Department of Audit? And if they are to be dissolved, I saw in the bill that we're putting out or looking at that the county commissioners are to withhold stuff. But what do you ever call these people on the phone and actually ask them, or do you have people in your office that do that? Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman. So just in general, the types of paperwork that has to be submitted to us is the basic financial report. So that's going to have revenues, expenditures, cash, and investments. And then based on revenue and expenditure levels, that determines additional paperwork. That paperwork would involve, for example, a proof of cash. So essentially a bank statement reconciliation would involve a internal control evaluation with some limited, I'll say, testing of information. And then if you have revenues or expenditures of $500,000 to $1 million, that requires a CPA review, and over $1 million requires an audit, a CPA audit. And then in terms of do we contact people, we are in pretty constant communication with these entities. We track who's responsible for reporting, what paperwork we have from them, what stage we're in the reporting, and we reach out to those entities to make sure they're aware of what the requirements are, so that we can get an idea of when that might come into us. So our staff spends a significant amount of time corresponding with these entities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for the department? Further question, and this is just on, we have a draft bill before us as well, but this is on the report. On the report. Seeing none, thank you very much. I think, I've got to pull my agenda here. I think we'll actually, Ms. Sharp, if you want to maybe walk us through the bill, you don't have to come up front if you don't want to. You can go do it from there, and you folks can stay there if you want. Ms. Henson, you can come up if you want, so that we can keep moving. I think, members, just looking at the time, it's almost noon, lunch hour, and I know that cuts into our agency folks' lunch hour a bit, but I think we can probably be done by 1 o'clock, and I would say we just proceed unless there's a strong objection to proceeding. Seeing no objection, go. All right, we'll proceed. So Ms. Sharp, if you would just walk us through draft 235, please.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Chairman, this is our fourth version of this.
I think maybe we need you on a microphone.
Oh, sorry, you can't, is that better?
That is better. I think the folks online
Okay.
need to hear you too. Thank you.
So as you recall, at the, originally LSO was directed to amend its 9-1-507 to clarify what, or to delete the reference to grants and loans. And that was because during the 2022 amendments, the grants and loans that were, or the legislation provided that the agencies that were not complying with the audit report, that they had to withhold grants and loans and to any entities. And so there was inconsistency in how that was interpreted. So that's what the first version of the bill did. Then we clarified that the funds that were withheld would actually be sales and use taxes. And then what the committee directed at our last meeting is to work with the Department of Revenue to actually make this a feasible process. And so we did work with the Department of Revenue. So if you'll turn to page 2 of your bill draft, and you'll see what on line 9, sorry, let's go to line 6. On line 6, the director of the Department of Audit, and then we'll go down to line 9, what the director will do is he will notify the director of the Department of Revenue of which entities have failed to comply. And this is the list of counties, cities, and towns that have failed to comply with not just with the census requirement, but also with providing this additional information based on the amount of revenues of the entity. And then we'll go down to, now we're going to go to line 12. So this will say, notwithstanding any other provision of law, and those other provisions of law are that the Department of Revenue has to distribute these sales and use taxes. So notwithstanding those provisions, the director of the Department of Revenue, what they will do is they will withhold monthly disbursements of state and local sales, use, and lodging tax revenues. And as you'll recall, the testimony by Director Henson at the last meeting is that, and she's here to explain this in much better than I can, but what the Department of Revenue does is they provide a check every month of all of the sales and use taxes, not just the state portion, but of all the local sales and use taxes and the lodging tax. So basically, they will withhold that check. And we have changed the wording. We've said that in this on line 14, we've said that they'll withhold the monthly disbursements. So it's anticipated that these entities will get those funds just as soon as they comply. So then when you go down to line 15, and it says the state and local sales, use, lodging tax revenues under 3915-111, that's the state sales tax. Under 3915-211, that's local sales tax. 3916-111 is the state use taxes, and 3916-211 are the local use taxes. Then if you'll go down, so they'll withhold them until the non-compliant entity complies. And then if you look on line 19, there was an amendment by the committee that said, unless good cause for compliance is shown to the director of the Department of Audit, as described in 9-1-510 that we'll get to on the next page. Then on line 21, the director of the Department of Audit will withhold those disbursements again, until the county, city, or town is compliant. Then if we go to page 3, on line 3, and this is where we had another amendment. The director of the Department of Audit will certify to the, the director of the Department of Audit will certify to the Department of Revenue. Basically, the Department of Audit is going to tell the Department of Revenue when this entity becomes compliant. Then on line 6, the director of the Department of Revenue will certify monthly to the Department of Audit, to the legislature, and to the non-compliant entity how much of the disbursements have been withheld. Then we go on over to page 4. Well, and actually, sorry, let me clarify. So then if you look at line 13 on page 3, now the section, this provision, this paragraph starts talking about the county treasurers. And this is funding in general, not totally, but in general, that's going to go to the special districts. So, line 13 through line 23 basically says, provides that the county commissioners, that they will then have to start complying with what they will basically do is provide notice in the paper to the non-compliant entities that that they have not been compliant and that they're in danger of being dissolved. Then if we'll turn over to page 4, this is where the withholding of funds will come at the county level. And what we've done here is in order to make it feasible for county treasurers to comply, it just provides that the county treasurers, again, that they will withhold any disbursements. So if they provide, however each county works, they just basically, they won't give any checks, they won't give any funds to the special districts until they comply. And if you go to line 13, but you did have us, you had us add, unless good cause for noncompliance is shown. And that noncompliance will be explained in just a minute. And then down on line 22 and 23, the county treasurer then will certify to the Department of Audit and to the legislature and to that non-compliant entity how much they are withholding, how much of their disbursements they are withholding. So then if we go down to on page 5 to line 16, this is where you have described what good cause is. And you have stated that good cause means that it's reasons beyond the control of the reporting entity. And then this is where on line 18, the director of the Department of Audit can require a letter of engagement with a certified public accountant or other evidence to show that it's outside of the control of that entity to provide the compliant documents. On page 6, what you've asked for here, what you asked for on this, and I'm sorry, let's go to page 5, line 23. This 39-13-104, this talks about levying taxes. And what you directed at the last meeting was that we add a provision that specifically prohibits the county commissioners from certifying any future tax rates or taxes for the non-compliant entity. And Director Henson can kind of explain how this actually works in reality. It's a little bit different, but what lines 5 through 11 just provides is that the county commissioners shall not certify any tax levies for special districts until they are compliant with the Department of Audit requirements. And this language, you'll notice, is a little tiny bit different than the language in the rest of the bill. That is because this language, when it talks about 9-1-507, is actually taken from Title 18, where which in the provisions that actually provide for dissolving, also dissolving special districts if they haven't been compliant. That's the bill draft.
Thank you.
Mr.
Ms. Sharp.
Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative Ottman.
I was just wondering what draft are we looking at? My numbers are a lot different. I have version 0.3.
So there is a version 0.4, and you should, it's online. And there was a couple technical corrections that were noticed here in the last couple of days, and I apologize for that. They did not change the intent of the bill, but they were just a couple things, oversights that were made. So we're in 0.4, and it is online. I just pulled it up. I think what Ms. Sharp did not outline was the repealers, repeal J1, J3. J1 is the current statute regarding cities, towns, and counties. And then 3 gave the auditor's office some responsibilities. So I think maybe we should dispense with the auditor's office because they are here probably to thank us for taking them out of this statute. But I would defer to the auditor if she has any comments. The auditor is indicating no, she has no comments, and thank you very much for taking her out of this process. And you're welcome, Madam Auditor, Madam Deputy Auditor. So truly nothing you'd like to provide to the committee? Okay, thank you very much. Good to see you, as always. All right. So now let's go with, let's just start with, I think, let's start with Director Henson, since she's done a lot of work with our LSO staff in putting together this Romanet 2, which would outline her responsibilities within this process. So, Director Henson, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss Draft 235. Yes, quite a bit of work has been done, and I do appreciate Ms. Sharp's coming over, meeting with us. She met with both Christy Urick and myself. Christy sends her regrets that she couldn't be here, but her father passed away. So as we look at this proposed language, I'm kind of going to just cut to the chase. The biggest piece of what you'll see in the change is that it allows us to continue our function as far as a distribution. And I had provided a handout that had basically 4 pieces to it. And in the interest of time, I won't go through each one of those, but it started out with an example. In Natrona County, it looked like this. It was a $1 million sales tax and a $100,000 use tax. And it started the process of how we look at this distribution. And the documents that you have before you are at month end, but it's important to recognize that we do this reconciliation on a daily basis. So on every night, we run this process where we take all of the remitted sales and use tax, and we run it through this process so that the next morning we can balance with the payments that came in and then to the entities that it would go to. So that first page, it just breaks it down, and it breaks it down in sales and use tax, and it breaks it down into general purpose, the 4%, and then shows the, just in that top part, general fund share, municipal share, admin fee, guaranteed county allocation, and then it talks about this amount that we're going to distribute further. The next document is this, looks like this on the next page, and it takes those numbers, if you follow the colors, it shows those calculations. And again, I'm not going to go over each one of those. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I am hoping that you're seeing the significance of changing that distribution process. The next document is a report that is created that shows for each entity that receives sales and use tax, both the state portion, which would be on the far left corner, then there's a solid line, and then the local portion and how it's distributed. Where we need to get to is this document. This is the document that accompanies the check that goes to each of the entities at the end of the month, so that that entity knows exactly where that money came from. So for example, sales tax, the county allocation prorated. So if you look at Natrona County, and you add the $15,690.99 to the $3,333.33, that totals $19,024.32. And if you look at this report on the very top, that matches up with local entity share county allocation, $19,024. So if you go further down, the municipal distribution, $33,949, that's reflected under the next column, under local entity share municipal distribution. We can go down through these totals. So number 5, in my notes here, down at the bottom of that first page, sales tax, $29,674.43. You can see that reflected in local general purpose option. So the dollars flow is what I'm stating. So based on the changes on page 2, where it talks about us not dispersing that month-end payment, what we would do is, for example, if it were Casper that was non-compliant, you'll see on this second page in this document, $159,495.91 for the local option, and then the $183,210.41. The total of those two is noted above, $342,706.32. We would withhold dispersing that check. And upon notification from the Department of Audit that they are compliant, then we would distribute that money to that entity. But by handling it in that manner, at least we're not affecting the flow and the programming. And I think that that would be, if we have 2 months that we didn't distribute, we'd have 2 of those reports. We could notify the Department of Audit. We could notify the legislature of those entities. And with that, I feel that the sales and use tax piece of the bill, I've tried to cover, and I'll answer any questions before I move on to the property tax piece.
Any questions on that? So really what we're trying to do is do this at the appropriate stage in the process. Instead of going upstream and trying to decide different streams of revenue, we're just talking about the resultant stream of disbursement. Go ahead, please proceed with the next part if you'd like, Director Henson.
Mr. Chairman, on the property tax piece, I've asked them to hand out a document that looks like this. I thought this might be helpful in that what this document is, this one happens to be Albany County. So once the mill levies are set, county commissioners establish the mill levies that first Monday in August, and then tax roll is completed by the third Monday in August. On August 10th, county assessors across the state are required to report to the State Board of Equalization all taxes that are being levied. This document is that document for Albany County as it relates to special districts and mill levies and fees, special assessment fees. So the first page says special district levies and taxes, and the second page says report of special assessments. The reason why that is important is county commissioners have authority over this page. However, they do not have any authority on the second page, that is fees. So the portion of the bill that talks about the county commissioners shall not levy, certify any levies if the entity is not in compliance, that would only be applicable to the those that are levying a mill levy. So just to get an idea, looking on the list, that is the non-compliance list that the Department of Audit put together. For example, for Albany County, most of the entities that are not in compliance, unfortunately, don't levy a mill levy. So it's not going to be a significant tool, but yet, you could have a municipality, you could have someone levying a mill levy that is not in compliance, and then they would not be able to levy that mill. Now, it should be noted that this is not a situation where they can come back once they're in compliant and then levy that mill. Tax roll is compiled on the third Monday and completed by the third Monday of August, and the assessor has to provide that to the county treasurer, so the county treasurer can issue those tax bills. So it's not a situation that 3 months later that can change. And so just wanted the committee to be aware of that. So with this bill, I do believe that it's workable. I'm not sure that it accomplishes quite the tool that we had hoped that would be in the toolbox for these special districts, because quite frankly, the majority of them don't levy a property tax. The majority of their income statewide is derived from fees. And you can see the various types of fees on that second report. This is just one county. You've got irrigation districts. You've got improvement and service districts that just assess $120 per lot. Those are collected by the county treasurer, but they're not really considered a property tax. Those are just fees that those special districts have the statutory authority to ask the county treasurer to include on the tax bill. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So thank you. So I want to clarify, because there's new language on page 4. It's actually existing language on line 8 into 9 and 10. It talks about the distributions, the county general shall withhold any further disbursements of money to the district. So it seems to me that still covers fees, covers any monies that the treasurer would receive on behalf of any entity that is non-compliant. But when your testimony said it doesn't get to those non-property tax-based things. So am I missing something? Or I understand the county commissioner part of it and the levy issue. That I understand that. But if there are fees collected by the county treasurer, and that's page 2, this schedule on page 2, does this not cover those as well? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that clarification. You're absolutely right. You're spot on. Those fees, the treasurer could not distribute if this were to pass. My comments were specific to the requirement that the county commissioners can't certify a mill levy. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so, and if I could just go a little further on the timeline of the levy approval, or the certifying the levy. We're talking about an entity that was actually non-compliant in the year prior year, that it would impact the succeeding year in that August timeline. So they would have been out of compliance for months, nearly, or almost, not quite a year, but 9 months prior to that non-certification of a levy. Is that based on the current bill draft? Is that how you would also see that as accurate?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. From October of the prior year to August, it's that first Monday in August that the commissioners must set the levies. Now, the fees, different timeline.
Thank you. The second thing is, and since your office is primarily responsible for the disbursement of cities, towns, and counties, and that's the new subsection in this, when are those disbursements typically made? I know there's different calendars for different entities. Community colleges are on a different calendar, et cetera. But let's just talk about cities, towns, and counties, just to remind the committee of what they would be, since I think that's majority of what we're seeing right now.
Mr. Chairman, so for sales and use tax, it's the last day of the month that we're distributing those on a monthly basis. As far as the county treasurers, and when they collect property tax and then distribute, or fees, that would be a monthly date. I don't think it's at the end of the month. I believe it's the middle of the month that they actually distribute.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, questions for Director Henson? And thank you very much for your work with our LSO staff. I think it is quite mechanically simplified, and I appreciate that very much. Any questions for our staffs? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thinking of this as a worst-case scenario, what happens to the disbursements that are withheld if the entity dissolves? What happens to that money? Thank you.
Ms. Henson, first of all, I think it depends on where the money's being held. If it's held in the county treasurers, that's the county commissioners that are doing that dissolution, and that would be handled either by their authorizing statute or county commissioners have some latitude. I do not know about something that might be held by your office, so I think it's accommodated for in statute based on special districts and all that, but I do not know if the treasurer was holding money and, excuse me, the Department of, anyway, you know what I'm saying. The department is holding the money.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, so what we're distributing is sales and use tax, and that's only going to counties, cities, and towns. So we're not in that situation where they're going to dissolve. So it truly would be county treasurers related to what happens with those funds if a district is dissolved. And they actually, there are statutes that handle all of that because we have those situations where there may be, whether it's dissolution or you've got two fire districts that combine, there's actually statutes that guide that entire process.
There might be debts, not even money. There might be debts as well for some of those. So, all right. Further questions for Ms. Director Henson? Questions for Director Henson? Seeing none. Department of Audit, do you want to make any comments? Thank you, Director, about the bill draft, where it stands, and accomplishing some of the concerns that we've had. This committee has worked with you over the last 3 or 4 years on.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we have any additional comments that have
Okay,
been said.
thank you. Thank you, Senator Nethercott. Committee, any questions for Department of Audit? I have one question. This question came up in the last meeting as well. In the way this is, the way it was done before, current statute, and in this bill, we continue to have a split date between cities, towns, and counties for when they're when disbursements are going to be withheld, and special districts. And I guess I personally don't like that disparity. And I know we created it, the legislature created it, so I want to have a discussion about maybe, so in the current new language, which is, the dates are the same in the existing language, it is October 15th that disbursements start to be withheld, cities, towns, and counties. Under special districts, it is November 30th that districts, or that funds begin to be withheld. So I guess maybe, let's say we do everything we can educationally on the front end, and hopefully we reduce the number of folks on the back end. It's a huge hammer to start withholding sales use from going from state grants and loans to sales use and lodging tax in this particular new section. That's a whole different level of hammer, notwithstanding the interpretation issues we had with state loans and grants, right? So would you talk, or would you give any thought about making a consistent date? And I'm going to go for the later date because of the size of this hammer, both not just logistically for the Department of Audit based on disbursement dates, but just the significance of it and where that places you. The majority of your entities are in that November 30th already, meaning special districts. So we're adding 99 municipalities and 23 counties to that different date. While that's the majority of the money, or could be a lot of the money, what would your thoughts be about having a consistent date between the two processes? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think conceptually, we like a consistent date. In terms of what that date should be, I think for us, the earlier we can get entities into compliance, the better. Because when that information comes in, we analyze it to make sure, is the form complete? Does the information make sense? And so we spend a lot of time working with the entities, trying to make sure the data is as best a quality it can be without being audited. And so the later that comes into us, the less opportunity we have to analyze that data and kind of reach out to the entity and go back and forth to get the best data we can before we have to produce the cost of government report. So historically, we end up with a number of entities because they report how late the report comes in. We're basically just putting that information into the cost of government as reported without getting a chance really to analyze or reach out to the entity. So for us, the earlier we can get that, the better.
Thank you. So how many entities that are going through this process with are out of the second bucket versus the first bucket? Meaning special districts coming in after November 30th versus cities, towns, and counties coming after October 15th. I mean, round numbers, 2 and 10, 2 and 50, please.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that we have that information available right now. We could get it. There are many more special districts than cities, towns, and counties. So there's going to be more in that second bucket of special districts than there are cities, towns, and counties.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the Director, Department of Audit? Any questions? All right, public testimony, and I didn't see any treasurers here, county treasurers here. I thought we might see a county treasurer here. Yeah, I see Jeremiah. All right, any public comment, broad public comment? Mr. Riemann? No? Pardon? Only if we have questions for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. Any discussion, any further public comment? Is anybody online? No one online for public comment. All right. Committee, we have a bill draft before us. Public comment is closed. We have a bill draft before us. And with passage of this bill draft, you will make the state auditor very happy if it passes the legislature, and we like a happy state auditor. So this is 235. We like everybody to be happy, but they like, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
There's a motion by Senator Guru and a second by Representative Sherwood to advance this bill for introduction by the committee to the legislature. Let's just walk through the bill, and any amendments on page 1? Any amendments on page 2? Any amendments on page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Discussion of the bill. Discussion of the bill. Saying no discussion? So I'll make a couple of comments. One, I'm going to continue, if this bill passes out of this committee for introduction on the floor, I'm going to work with the Department of Audit to understand if there's a date that can be consistent between the two processes that also accommodates the current distribution dates, so that we don't maybe double withhold from one set of entities before the other one doesn't get any withholdings. And I think there's probably a spot in there somewhere. I don't know where it is, and I'm tempted just to make it October 3rd or November 30th on the first one and the second one, but I think maybe I should understand it a little better. The second one I'm going to throw out is, I think that, and I'll visit with maybe some of the special district folks about the page 6, where not certifying the tax levy. If maybe someone's non-compliant, but if they have obligations, debt obligations or something like that, and we're not certifying, I mean, I know we already have one problem with them not reporting and stuff, but we have a second problem that we maybe actually, they've already been dissolved, but now they don't have debt. So there's a challenge with that, I think. And maybe we should actually say not certify a district that's been in the process of being dissolved, or something more specific, because the way I understand the process, there would be a dissolution process ensuing. because of that December deadline. So I think there's two things in here that I'm going to continue to explore if this bill were to pass out of this committee for introduction. But otherwise, I do appreciate all the work that went into it, and I think it actually gets to the heart of ensuring compliance for the right reasons without hopefully harming our entities. So further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll on committee sponsorship of working, or LSO 235 as a committee bill.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for 24 LSO 235.4 financial reporting amendments. Senator Beitman.
Aye.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott. Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Nyman.
Excused.
Representative Ottman.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Chairman Barlow.
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the motion is adopted and move forward.
Thank you very much. 2 bills down. Thank you very much for the work, both particularly with Department of Revenue, trying to get through this, some of the things. I understand that there was a discussion in a previous committee about having monthly taxes, property taxes too. I bet that went well for them, huh? All right, I'm glad that's not our committee. I've been down that road with a good director. All right, I think most of our business that's on the agenda is complete, but Senator Furphy had a concern that's come from his community, and I want to give him a chance to outline that. And that's with the education requirements. Did you want to talk about that, Senator Furphy? And maybe we get some clarification. So Department of Audit, there'll be maybe a couple questions out of this for you. So did you want to discuss that, Senator Furphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well,
thank you.
What I need to do is understand if it was more than just an issue in our county. The education requirements for the financial reporting, I was contacted by the school board members, and they were saying this training is excessive. The former chairman of the board said it took about 8 hours to complete financial education, and that's pretty excessive for school board members, when again, in our county, we have an administrator and we have a treasurer. Those two should meet the requirements, but to have every school board member go through that process, they thought that was excessive. So, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to find out is if it was just an issue in our county, or if it's a problem elsewhere. I did draft an amendment saying for those districts who have an administrator and a treasurer, the larger districts, and for example, even city council members, they shouldn't necessarily have to go through that training. But if it's only an issue in our area, then it's not worth me presenting that amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Furphy. Senator Furphy had reached out to me a couple weeks ago regarding this issue, and I think maybe it's a good time now for the Department of Audit to kind of remind us what the training opportunities are. I know that there's been several come online, if you will, not just online, but if you'd come forth, Director and Mr. Cummings, and just kind of remind us, they're being offered, where it's being offered, what the kind of, I think you have your own in-house one now or online one, what the time commitment is there, not getting into so just practically what's out there and what kind of, what resources are out there. And then we can get in, if we want to, we can proceed with the who should be doing or not. You don't have to come up with that. We've already made a policy decision as a legislature that it's those folks are included. If we want to make exceptions, you don't have to get in that. But just tell us what resources are out there so people can actually comply with this, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'll give the information that I can, and then if Rich needs to give additional detail, he can jump in. So we offer training ourselves. So we offered an in-person with a remote option. We have another remote option planned at the end of this month. That training is about 5.5 hours, covers everything that's required. Don't know that we can speak to how much time other entities training, because other entities can say, here's the training we offer, and then we give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether it covers everything it's supposed to. But there are other options. Some of the special district associations or other municipality associations that are offering their own training or are planning on offering their own training. And those, as I understand it, are kind of like module by module. So you don't have to take it all at once. You don't have to set aside, 6-8 hours all at once to do it. You could do it piecemeal over time. And I think internally, we've had discussions about maybe what other options we could offer as well, so that it's not having to set aside a large block of time.
Thank you. And would you remind me from our previous bill when those requirements, we had a delayed date. So remind me when folks actually have to start becoming compliant with that, if you would, please, or participating in that.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's July 1 of 24.
Okay, thank you. And that's my recollection as well. So the requirements aren't actually in place until July 1 of 24. So they still have 6-8 months to get those, and then it would start counting toward the succeeding year. And it's a one-time thing also. They do it one time, anytime in their tenure or up until their tenure, it's done. Are you hearing from any? So I'm going to commit to my good colleague that I'll reach out to the School Boards Association, make sure that they have a lot of members throughout the state, 48 school districts with 7 to 9 members. So that's a lot of members so let's make sure that we're accommodating any other concerns, and maybe we do bring something later to accommodate some of that. But let's try to reach out. If you don't mind, maybe reaching out to School Boards Association, I'll do the same thing and just see if there's something we can do to help in their understanding of the process, just for the association and also for their members. And just to note that a lot of these associations are doing it for their members within the context of their annual or semi-annual meetings. So when everybody's together, they do a couple hours, and that helps get that out of the way. So we'll work on that some more. I think Senator Murphy, anything else you would want to comment on, Mr. Cummings, or either? No, okay. Anything, Senator Murphy? Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will also check with our school board about that, because, that sounds like an easy solution to the problem. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, our pleasure. Anything else for the Department of Audit, since we got him sitting in the chair? The county commissioners, general public comment? General public comment. Well, okay, thank you very much, Department of Audit. So now we'll go to just general public comment on anything that this committee should come before this committee. And we welcome Mr. Ryman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I'll just relate to the last conversation very quickly. And I'll start by saying I think the department is doing yeoman's work to get this word out there, offer trainings, whether they're in person or virtual. They've done that a couple of times. They did it for our members as well as the other county elected officials just last month. I'm working right now with the department on how many of the county commissioners have made it through the process. It looks like over 75 of the 93 have currently completed that process. So I'm optimistic that all the county commissioners are going to make it through this. If I can just relate, the place that I continue to hear from county commissioners is a concern about their special district counterpart personnel being able to get through this requirement for a variety of reasons, but mostly it's a time commitment. These are largely volunteer positions. They perhaps have a meeting of a couple of hours quarterly, and now they're being asked to go through a training of 8 hours. If I were to make a recommendation to you and broader to the legislature, it would be to give the department the resources to produce a virtual version of this that could be self-paced, that those individuals as well as our members and future members could utilize. The department is expending a lot of money to get this out there. We're expending a lot of money to get this training out there, as well as all of the other associations to try and make sure people are compliant. And I think we can just do this in one fell swoop by having one entity develop everything up. So that would be my recommendation. For us, my intent in trying to understand how many of the commissioners have gone through is to determine how fast I have to produce something myself. We will likely we do a new commissioner orientation every 2 years. We will likely produce a series of videos for our members that are more specific to county issues. But a lot of this doesn't require that. And if I'm advocating for anybody, it's for the special districts and others that are having to go through this and are struggling to find a way forward and such. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. But again, I want to make it very clear. I do think that the department is doing a tremendous amount of positive work to try and make this happen.
Thank you very, very much. And I agree, and I appreciate their work. I also appreciate the work of your association and the many others that are trying, because as we knew, we'd have a big hurdle, a whole bunch to do early on, and then there's just a maintenance process, right? Getting new folks trained up as we go. So we understood, and that's some of the reason we have a delayed timeline. We gave, I think, hopefully significant latitude to the department to authorize other programs, other entities to do this. I am receptive to the apparent appropriation request you're making, that we give some resources to the agency to actually accomplish something that may be outside. So maybe that's a discussion maybe the agency's having a little bit with as they prepare their budget, which I'm sure they're presenting or talking about now. And maybe we all have, if they would like to follow up with this with me personally, we can maybe figure something out to go in as a budget amendment for specific use for this type of purpose. And I'm personally open to that, and I think I appreciate the suggestion. So, any other questions? Anything for Mr. Riemann? Please, Senator Grew.
Thank you. Just quick, I don't want to belabor too much. Jeremiah, thanks. Yeah, your point's well taken. And in the special districts, we want to try, and I too, and I see another appropriator over there nodding her head too, that we stand ready to help you too with that, if possible. But make no mistake, when we set the bar for special districts that have audits, and they said it was too low and it was onerous on them, and so we pulled back from that. But the bottom line is we wanted to get to do the dang audits. We want to make sure, and I know you do too. And so we don't want to make it too onerous on them, but that's what we're shooting to do, is to get more compliance. And so is to get that list as short as possible. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremiah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, complete agreement with you. And as soon as that non-compliant list came out, I was looking at it from a county perspective of who do I got to contact. So I contacted every county treasurer and clerk that was on there. And so they worked to comply. Number two, I contacted our county commissioners and said, hey, you've got a slew of special district folks that are on this list. Can you do your part to try and make sure that they're getting the help that they need? And so we want to be a partner with you in that effort. I think all around this is a good thing. I'm concerned that, if a special district has to travel to go to one of these trainings, and again, they're putting it online, so that's helpful. But if we can do more to make sure that it is accessible at home, the better.
Yep. And I appreciate that, and thank you. We'll continue to, I've got 2 appropriators that are going to take up the mantle right here. So the chairman is out of the room apparently also. Yeah. All right. Anything else for Mr. County Commissioners Association, Mr. Reaman? Seeing none. Is anybody online? Nope. Any final comments? Go to the order. Good to the order. Final comments? Public comment? All right. Seeing nothing. We've passed 2 bills and 1 motion to direct an RFP. We had 3 bills that did not make muster for our process. So going forth, I think, what do we have total now to going to the session? Just these 2 bills?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so 2 bills. I will confer with my Senate leadership about the Senate confirmation process bill, which I shouldn't say it did not pass. We just didn't take it up as a sponsorship bill. So, all right. Seeing nothing. Anything else from LSO?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't know do you have any preference which house they will start in?
Which, I'll work on that with you. I'll talk with Chairman Brown after offline, and we'll work with you and get that. All right, seeing nothing, we are adjourned. Thank you for your attention and time. Thank you to all those who participated, and we'll look forward to maybe not a meeting until the next interim.